Всім добрий вечір.
За нашу мрію про Україну.
Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of our warriors,
За наше життя, життя українців.
wings for freedom. Wings for freedom.
Шановні громадяни України.
Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave. On behalf of every father and every mother. Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors. And paves the way.
Welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines and informs you about the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. We broadcast every week at 2100 Kyiv time, this time right now. We really appreciate everyone tuning in to hear us, and we have a great program for you today. We've got a lot to discuss. So we will be first going over the news report. I'll be presenting some general news about the goings-on in Ukraine. That will be followed by our German aid to Ukraine report, which we do every week. And then we will have a discussion of a recent article written by our analyst at Tochnyi and also, I guess, the featured guest, Colby, who wrote an article for the Insider magazine about cluster munitions for Ukraine. So we have John and Colby here to discuss that. And then we have a few people on the panel like Andrew for some more general updates and things like that. We'll have a more open panel discussion towards the end. So we appreciate everyone tuning in. Please do subscribe to the Tochnyi account, both on Twitter and on YouTube, where we broadcast, because we do streams and, present information outside of the weekly schedule. So if you want to be kept updated on the latest from us, the best way is to subscribe. So thanks everyone. And I will now present the news. So we will get some video up. I should mention last week we had like tons and tons of videos. So this week we decided maybe we'll simplify it a bit, which means occasionally I think there might be a little bit of, the thing on the screen won't quite exactly match exactly what I'm talking about, which is, I don't think is a big deal, but it made for, I think, more like cohesive videos. So if we could maybe have the video switch. Okay, great. So I'm going to go ahead and present from Monday, December 11th. So on Monday, in a significant move to bolster Ukraine's maritime capabilities, the United Kingdom and Norway have launched the Maritime Capability Coalition. This initiative aims to enhance Ukraine's ability to operate effectively in naval domains, particularly in the Black Sea. This is in response to ongoing challenges faced by Ukraine due to Russia's blockade of the Black Sea, which has, of course, severely impacted the country's ability to export efficiently. Key components of the coalition include the transfer of 2 Royal Navy Sandown-class mine hunter ships from the UK to the Ukrainian Navy. These mine hunters are expected to provide vital capability for Ukraine, particularly in saving lives at sea and opening up the export routes, which have been limited. The long-term goal of the Maritime Capability Coalition is to transform the Ukrainian Navy, making it more compatible with the Western allies and interoperable with NATO. The coalition of the Navy is part of a broader series of capability coalitions. This is how the allies organized this, which were agreed upon during the meetings of the 50 nations for the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which aimed to strengthen Ukraine's operations across multiple domains. Sweden has also announced a substantial humanitarian package for Ukraine, valued at Swedish kroner of 1.4 billion, which, if I converted it correctly, is about $137 million US. This package is the largest non-military Swedish support for Ukraine so far. It's designed to assist with the impacts of Russian attacks on civilian infrastructure, particularly during the winter months. The support focuses on bolstering the energy system, emergency shelters, health and medical systems, and wants to help Ukraine endure the winter, as I said. The Swedish aid will be channeled through international agencies, including the World Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, UNESCO, and the Swedish Civil Contingencies Agency. Next day, on Tuesday, December 12th, in a significant cyber operation, Ukraine's military intelligence cyber units from the main intelligence directorate, known as HUR, launched a successful attack on the Russian Federal Tax Service. The operation resulted in the infiltration and infection with malware of one of the key central servers of the Federal Tax Service and over 2,300 of its regional servers across Russia, including in Russian-occupied Crimea. The result was the complete destruction of the tax system's entire database, including all backup copies. This cyber attack has paralyzed the communication between the central office in Moscow and its regional departments, as well as the Federal Tax Service and the IT company Office.editru, which was responsible for the tax data center. Experts are estimating that the system will not be functional for at least a month. Attempts to restore the service so far have been unsuccessful, and this indicates already that there's been a significant impact on Russia's tax infrastructure as a result. Previously, HUR has orchestrated the hacking of television channels in Crimea to broadcast a speech by President Zelenskyy, and the SBU, the security services of Ukraine, have hacked into the website of Russia's labor ministry. The multitude of Russian tax data, which Ukraine was able to obtain as a result of this attack, will certainly add to the significance of this cyber operation in the future. And by the way, it's quite difficult to find good footage of like hacking stuff, right? It's like in movies, they always have to make it look more interesting than it is. This is about the Belarusian cyber partisans, which is a really interesting group. I recommend people check out their work because they're cool people. Just a couple other small items for Tuesday. The Ukrainian military reported a substantial new offensive by Russian forces on Avdiivka, which is an area where there's been intense fighting in the east of Ukraine. 610 artillery shellings within the vicinity of Avdiivka within that 24-hour period on Tuesday. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, during his visit to Washington, D.C., emphasized the importance of continued support for Ukraine, warning that a lack of support would benefit Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelenskyy was scheduled to meet with President Joe Biden and House Speaker Mike Johnson. He also met with IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva after the IMF's executive board approved the $900 million disbursement for Ukraine. And I should mention, there's a little bit more to that story, but we'll have maybe John give us an update on what's going on with U.S. funding for Ukraine. So for Wednesday, December 13th, the Ukrainian army confirmed repelling enemy attacks in areas near Pryutny and Novopokrovka in the Donetsk region. Ukrainian forces captured a key hill, offering a strategic vantage point near Pivdene. I guess maybe later Andrew can tell us if it was truly significant. President Biden and President Zelenskyy also met at the White House. I already covered that. And then Russian bombardment of Kherson on Wednesday resulted in 1 death and 4 injuries, which was, of course, a very tragic attack. There have been multiple attacks on Ukrainian hospitals and other power infrastructure this week. I would say the average has been about 20 to 40 Shahid drones, and one day I know there were several cruise missiles used on Ukraine. So rather than go through each one, maybe that's worth mentioning. Then the big Wednesday, December 13th, the United States recently imposed new sanctions targeting over 250 entities and individuals globally, aiming to further isolate Russia due to the ongoing war in Ukraine. The U.S. Department of State and the Treasury announced these sanctions, which specifically named more than 250 individuals and entities in countries including Turkey, China, and the United Arab Emirates. These sanctions are part of an effort to crack down on evasion, weapons procurement, and sectors such as energy and mining. The targeted sanctions focus on those involved in weapons procurement for Russia, particularly 4 entities and 9 people in China, Russia, Hong Kong, and Pakistan. They target connections to Russia's energy sector. The U.S. Treasury Department explained that Russia's been offshoring the production of technology, equipment, and other goods needed for its military, relying on suppliers in other countries, third-party countries like this. These sanctions aim to disrupt Moscow's supply chains and target entities that have been sending Russia dual-use goods, such as critical components for its weapon systems. The latest round involves the national Turkish national Berk Turkin for his role in procurement with Russia for procurement of military equipment and ties to Russian intelligence services, and a UAE-based network which was involved in illicit finance. All property interests in property of the sanctioned parties are blocked and must be reported to U.S. authorities. And that's kind of how these sanctions work. Okay, next item. This is also on Thursday, December 13th. On December 13th, Ukraine's largest telecom operator, Kyivstar, was hit by a significant cyber attack, disrupting mobile and internet services for its nearly 25 million mobile subscribers and over 1 million home internet customers. The attack in Ukraine, particularly impacting the capital region. Kyivstar attributed the attack to the ongoing war with Russia and has been working with law enforcement and special state services to address the situation. While the company works to restore services, it remains largely offline and plans to compensate all affected subscribers and corporate clients. The pro-Russia hacktivist group Killnet claimed responsibility for the attack, though without providing any evidence to support this claim. This follows recent developments where the group's leader, known as Kill Milk, was unmasked and announced his retirement, leading to reorganization with Killnet. It's always funny to report hacker news because you have to say stuff like Kill Milk. Additionally, another Russia-linked hacking group, Solntsepyok, also claimed responsibility for the attack on Kyivstar. They asserted that their attack resulted in significant damage to Kyivstar's infrastructure, including the destruction of computers, servers, and cloud storage systems. Solntsepyok targeted Kyivstar due to its role in providing communication services to the Ukrainian armed forces. So a little bit of dispute about who's responsible for the attack. In any case, both of these attacks, the Ukrainian attack on the Federal Tax Service and this Russian attack on Kyivstar, were very significant, I would say, among the most significant cyber operations that have been conducted by both sides. So, just kind of, I think notable this week, there's been a significant escalation in the cyber warfare, and it's resulting in some pretty significant consequences. Like the Russian budget needs all the help it can get right now. So to have their whole tax database go up in smoke is not good for them. And of course, Ukrainians losing cell service for a week and a half now, it's like, that's really bad. So, people can't get air alerts. They can't, contact emergency services and so forth. So these are pretty significant attacks that have kind of real consequences. So maybe worth mentioning this week. Then on December 15th, at his annual press conference, which is sort of a big Q&A session, Russian President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed his commitment to the ongoing war in Ukraine, declaring that peace would only be achieved once Russia's goals were fully met. These goals, he outlined, include the denazification, demilitarization, and quote-unquote neutral status of Ukraine, echoing the same maximalist justifications that he gave for the full-scale invasion back in February 2022. In other words, really nothing presented here as any kind of willingness to negotiate or anything like that. He basically said Ukraine needs to capitulate on our terms, and that's the only way this war will end. Regarding military mobilization, Putin indicated that Russia has called up to 300,000 people during a partial mobilization in September of 2022, and that many were actively participating in the special military operations zone, his words. He highlighted the ongoing voluntary enlistment campaign, claiming that with volunteers, Russia's forces amounted to around 500,000. He stated there was no need for further mobilization at the moment, with about 1,500 volunteers signing up daily and approximately 600,000 Russian troops currently engaged in Ukraine. I'll editorialize a bit here and mention Russia, as I will outline later, Russia's currently raiding like warehouses for migrant workers to send to Ukraine. And American intelligence disputes this claim, saying, I want to say they said it was closer to about 500,000 in Ukraine, not 600,000. So a lot of people are kind of saying that he's full of malarkey here. Next paragraph. Putin's press conference also touched upon the economic aspects of the war. He claimed that Russia's GDP growth was expected to be 3.5 by the end of the year, suggesting a recovery from the previous year's decline and a significant step forward despite all of the challenges. He did, however, acknowledge an increase in inflation. He expected it to reach about 7 year's end and assured them that the central bank and the government were taking necessary measures to address this. He also admitted to the impact of Western sanctions, specifically citing the 40% increase in car prices due to the departure of foreign manufacturers. He noted that this had led to higher prices due to increased costs of imported components. He also responded to a pensioner complaint about the, of course, as Andrew will tell you, the astronomically rising price of eggs in Russia, which he apologized for and attributed to government failures. One thing maybe we should understand about this event, it's a highly choreographed event in Russia. It's been happening, every year, except it was canceled during the first year of the full-scale invasion. And I don't remember if they did it during COVID. I think they did, but just remotely. And it's very much designed to look informal. So it's like the most rehearsed event ever, but it tries to make Putin look relatable and informal. He jokes around a bit. It reminds me a little bit of the U.S. It's a combination of like, a Q&A and like the press conference dinner or whatever. He needs to, so it makes sense on some of these issues why he would kind of take a little bit of a beating, like get yelled at by a pensioner, right? That's kind of normal for this political event. Maybe more significant is the fact that he is kind of, trying to provide. I think the most significant takeaway is his unwillingness, his signaling unwillingness to negotiate in any way on Ukraine without full capitulation. He's still suggesting completely maximalist goals. Everything else is basically him padding numbers and trying to make things look good for the upcoming election, where election in big quotation marks, which mainly is meant to, further legitimize Putin's dictatorship and, make everything in Russia look nice and orderly, right? So this is all about Putin putting on a nice face for the elections and trying to show that he recognizes that there are some problems, that he's not deaf to the people's problems, but also that he's, the government has a firm control of it and that they're fixing the situation and that, he loves you guys, right? Like you can call in and talk to him. That's kind of the goal here, right? Overall, I think it was, I'd say a mostly, a middling success. Like I would say nothing really major went wrong for them, but nothing really impressive either. I don't think, anyone's going to change their mind about anything as a result of this event. So next item, I better get some water first. I'm kind of spiraling a bit with all this news. It was a big week, you guys. European leaders agreed to open accession talks with Ukraine and Moldova at their final summit of the year. This decision was reached despite a veto by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The EU also granted candidate status to Georgia and agreed on a 12th round of sanctions against Russia. The new sanctions target diamond exports and enhance enforcement of an EU price cap. Sorry, of an oil price cap that's agreed to with the US. EU leaders also called for decisive progress using extraordinary revenues held by private entities from Russia's frozen assets to support Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. The EU urged Russia and Belarus to return all unlawfully deported and transferred Ukrainian children and other civilians back to Ukraine. European Council President Charles Michel announced the decision to open accession negotiations and spoke with both the leaders of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia to congratulate them on this historic turn. Other EU leaders also welcomed the decision. Of course, the Estonian leader, Kallas, calling it a historic day for Ukraine, Moldova, and Europe. The idea for Viktor Orban to leave the room during the vote, which allowed the other EU leaders to move forward with the accession talks for Ukraine, was, according to a reporter from Deutsche Welle, proposed by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. This strategy was termed a constructive abstention. Moldovan President Maya Sandu and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, of course, both welcomed the decision. Zelenskyy described it as a victory for Ukraine and Europe as well, stating that it motivates, inspires, and strengthens Ukraine during the war. The decision was termed a signal of hope for the people of Ukraine and for the continent at large. The EU summit was not just about enlargement. A 50 billion euro aid package for Ukraine was also on the agenda. However, the EU leaders' decision to open accession talks and the aid package was met with criticism by Viktor Orban, who threatened to use his veto in the upcoming days leading to the summit. Deutsche Welle mentioned that there seems to be a softening stance from Viktor Orban on financial aid for Ukraine. Initially, Orban threatened a long-term veto and veto the accession talks and the aid, but seems to have softened his tone regarding financial support as well. And, I'll just editorialize here that very recently, the EU, I believe, opened up like 10 billion euros in funding to Hungary. The story with Hungary is the EU has frozen a bunch of funding that's supposed to go to Hungary from the EU because Hungary has started doing a bunch of like anti-democratic, anti-EU things, right? So a lot of this maneuvering by Orban can be understood in these terms. And the EU just agreed to give like 10 billion euros of this frozen money to Hungary. And I don't remember the exact numbers. Ben was looking at exact numbers. And, this is a huge chunk of money for the Hungarian economy. So, if I had to guess in terms of how to explain this recent change in tone from Orban and why did he leave the room, why is he maybe signaling some possibility to allow for some financial aid to Ukraine, probably it's a result of some negotiations where, Hungary is given some of this frozen money. Incidents involving Romania and Russia happened this week. So Romania summoned Russia's ambassador following a drone crash on its territory near the town of Grindu, which faces the Ukrainian port of Reni. The crash left a crater 1.5 meters deep. Also, I know that Ukraine has certainly alleged, and maybe others on the panel can confirm this later, that Russia has been using Romanian territory to route the drone strikes on Ukraine. So, kind of seems like a little bit of escalation there in terms of the border. There was a shocking incident which occurred in Transcarpathia, Ukraine on Friday, where a Ukrainian counselor detonated 2 grenades at a village meeting, injuring around 26 people. The attack was live streamed on Facebook, like the council meeting was being live streamed, and it left the room in chaos with smoke and bodies on the ground. The motive behind the attack remains unclear, but the Ukrainian authorities are investigating it as a terrorist attack. And the footage is widely available, so you can see what happened, but I would warn that it's rather disturbing. It's just people having a town meeting and a guy comes in with 2 grenades and throws them. They blow up. Okay, and December 16th, the final day for this week. On December 14th, so on December 14th, I don't know why I have this for the 16th, but I mentioned the IMF package, so here's just a little more information about it. Ukraine received the third package of financial aid reform from the International Monetary Fund. The package amounted to approximately 900 million. The Ministry of Finance highlighted that the funds raised are the result of a successful second review of the Extended Fund Facility Program for Ukraine by the IMF Executive Board. According to Serhiy Marchenko, Ukraine's Minister of Finance, this support from the IMF is critical for financing priority expenditures of the state budget and assuring macroeconomic stability under martial law conditions. The EFF program, the Extended Fund Facility, is seen as a key element in developing the government's economic program and Ukraine's path to full integration into the European Union. Ukraine has attracted about 4.5 billion of the 15.6 billion foreseen by the EFF program, which includes 11.6 billion in special borrowing rights. The EFF program is implemented in two stages for Ukraine, war and post-war, and provides access to credit funds from the IMF totaling 11.6 billion in special drawing rights. Packages under this program are provided based on the results of quarterly reviews, which, as was mentioned, Ukraine recently passed, and the total amount of financing for the IMF to Ukraine is set to increase 3.3 billion, and special drawing rights makes that 4.5 billion equivalent, following a successful additional review. Next item. In recent developments across Russia, a significant escalation in anti-migrant activities have been observed involving far-right and xenophobic movements. Notable incidents include a violent raid on a mosque in Kotelniki, a Moscow suburb, and a series of coordinated actions targeting migrant workers, particularly in Moscow and other cities. Bellingcat, in an independent investigation, reported that these raids are part of a broader campaign dubbed Nelegal 2023 law enforcement activities or agencies. Over 15,000 migrants have been deported as part of this campaign. Bellingcat's analysis, based on social media content, reveals that these operations are not isolated events, but part of a well-orchestrated series of raids that have been occurring throughout the year. They've identified 60 videos and photos depicting 50 raids between May and August, a period that coincided with the first stage of this exercise, and additional incidents following the second stage in autumn. A disturbing aspect of these raids is the apparent role of xenophobic Telegram channels in inciting and coordinating them. Channels like Multinational and Russian Community have not only been sharing footage of these raids, but appear to be actively involved in instigating them by publicizing the events or locations where migrants gather. These channels, boasting hundreds of thousands of followers, often share videos of police detentions and express support for these actions. The correlation between these channels' reports on migrant activities and subsequent police raids suggests a strong level of coordination. The raids have targeted various locations, including places of work, residences, and public gathering spots such as cafes, gyms, and football fields. The violence exhibited in these raids is alarming, with incidents of police brutality being reported and shared online. In one notable instance, members of the Russian Community Telegram channels claimed responsibility for a police raid that resulted in the detention of 49 migrants. Governments of Central Asia, who represent the primary migrant populations in Russia, have issued warnings against their citizens for joining the war in Ukraine, which reflects a growing concern over increased recruitment of their nationals in Russia. Furthermore, dual citizens and Central Asians who have become naturalized Russian citizens face particular risks due to their ambiguous status, with reports including new draft rules targeting this demographic, particularly for compulsive military service. It's like, I've heard that the scam is they'll register them for citizenship, like they'll give them the Russian citizenship, then they won't register them for like the draft or for like they won't register them properly for military service. Then in a couple months, they'll come and say, hey, you didn't register properly for military service. Guess that means you're drafted, right? That's kind of how it's like a sort of a scam. And reports from the Radio Liberty Tajik service, it's called Radio Azadi there, have also revealed that Russian companies sent Tajik laborers to work in Ukraine in areas occupied by Russian forces. This move highlights potential use of economic incentives to indirectly involve migrant workers in the conflict. And there's no official confirmation to indicate that there's a direct correlation between these raids and the recent efforts by Russia to like recruit Central Asians who are under pressure, who are like in jail and things like that. But the pattern seems pretty noticeable, and it seems pretty likely. Final item for this week is just a quick update. As of December 16th, a third Ukrainian truck driver has died while the drivers were waiting in the extensive queues caused by the blockade on the Polish border. The blockade, initiated by Polish truckers, I want to say about 3 weeks ago now, stemmed from their protest against the European Union's relaxation of some transport rules for Ukrainian trucks during the full-scale invasion. On December 11th, the Yahodin-Dorohusk border crossing between Poland and Ukraine was reopened. However, many other border checkpoints still remain affected by the blockade. As of the latest reports, around 2,600 lorries were queued to enter Ukraine at various checkpoints along the Polish border. The most effective checkpoints include Rabaruska, Krakowec, and Shehini, S-H-E-H-Y-N-I, Shehini, I'm going to go with. The blockades have led to considerable disruption in the movement of goods and have also raised concerns about humanitarian and economic impact in both Poland and Ukraine. The Ukrainian government is reportedly, there are high-level negotiations ongoing between transport ministries and other government bodies in the EU, Ukraine, and Poland. But as of the latest update on the ongoing situation, no settlement has been reached to lift the blockade at affected border crossings. So that concludes my news for today. It was a lot happened this week. So thank you for bearing with me. I will now turn it over to our...
One second, Joseph, before you go ahead.
Yeah.
I know that Andrew wanted to ask a question about the Putin session at the Channel 1. So
I'm so sorry. Okay, sure. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much a question. It's just 2 points. First, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud.
Okay. So there are 2 points. First, the Channel 1, I think that's the channel, right? Or maybe Channel 2, whatever the name is. They posted a promo for this event where they listed a whole bunch of questions that Putin was supposed to be asked, and the questions were obviously never asked to Putin, but the questions were really kind of funny. The questions were like, how come food prices are so high? Or how come inflation is so high if our salaries aren't increasing? It was all those sorts of questions that I think Russians are actually very interested in getting answers to, but obviously we're never going to be asked. So that was a pretty big controversy in Russia, and I think Channel 1's probably going to get in trouble for that. But there was also this meme that came out of this event where this man here over this guy's left shoulder, this guy was like he was like the presenter or whatever. But this guy over his shoulder, he's holding a sign that says B-O-L. It's a bull. And it just literally means pain. So he's just holding a sign that literally says pain. He's become like a huge meme in Russia. So when a lot of people look at this event, they just think of Pain Man. And I just think these 2 points are interesting because they kind of show more of what's really going on in Russia behind the facade of this event.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Absolutely. It's, this is a big part of the performativity of the Putin regime, I think. Like, it's an annual event. And this is kind of, I would say, the moment where the regime tries to channel frustration, right? And they try to do it in like more of a lighthearted way, right? So in other words, like you said, there are very substantive concerns that like workers have about their salaries. And the regime wants to try to let some of that steam off, but they try to frame it in such a way where it's like a granny yelling at Putin about the price of eggs, right? Because that's a little bit more like acceptable, right? And then the czar, right? Putin can sort of like present it as, it must be those local ministers that are causing all these problems. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, old lady. Like, I'll look into this. Or he can maybe admit a little bit of failure there to grandma, but like there's no real substantive address of the concerns, right? That's kind of, I think that's, I would describe that as like the primary goal of this event. It's like to let off steam in an acceptable way for the regime. Would you agree?
Yeah, and his like response to the eggs was to buy eggs from Turkey, where the price of eggs are like ridiculously high in Turkey because they don't have enough for themselves, and now
Right,
they're
yeah, like
supposed to sell to the Russians.
famously, Turkey is like the reason they're so interested in this Black Sea grain initiative is because their food prices are out of control, right? Like they're in the same boat as Russia and Ukraine, really.
Yeah, it's just all pretty amusing.
Yeah, eggs, man. I know you've been following the price of Russian eggs very closely.
Yeah, I've been following it since before this war. It's been somewhat amusing to watch. I remember when I started following the price, they were like 80 rubles or something like that, and now they're like 120, which is a substantial increase because you also have to factor in that the salaries have gone down. There's been rampant inflation, and the price of eggs are rising faster than inflation. This is an issue that predates the war. It's been going on for a very long time, and every Russian knows that, except the ones on
since the
Twitter
sanctions.
who pretend it isn't true.
Yeah, like since the sanctions, right? Like the dairy industry's kind of been in trouble in Russia since the sanctions started. In my
Oh
understanding.
yeah, the dairy industry too. Yeah, dairy and eggs just ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, and so yeah, this press conference Putin has every year. I think a lot of the numbers were padded. The economy definitely was. They're clearly trying to, and Ben had some econ analysis recently that they're padding the numbers on the GDP very strongly to try to present a countervailing narrative to the absolutely dismal news about constant inflation and wage stagnation, right? In other words, like they really don't have any good economic news to present, so their numbers to feel better. You might be able to in some way like explain some of it like as military spending. Look, I don't want to overstate the case here about how badly the Russian economy has been beaten here, but I'll just say that like the economy is certainly not in the position they want it to be going into, especially this election period, quote unquote, where they want to legitimate the dictatorship. And I think we're at least seeing some evidence of, as you said, Andrew, like people are groaning a bit. We shouldn't read too far into this level of groaning because this is kind of the state allowed period of groaning. But we can note that the groaning during this state allowed period of groaning is getting more acute. Is that, I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So like that, I think that's maybe how I don't want people to read too much into this stuff where it's like, oh, like someone asked about the price of eggs, they must be standing up to the regime, right? Like don't look at it that way. But we can look at like the regime's letting people complain a little bit here to like let off some steam. What are they complaining about? How loud are they complaining? And like, I'd say this is pretty loud compared to like last year or the year before and so forth.
Bull.
Anyway, go ahead, Andrew. Anything else you want to add about this? We'll wrap it up.
Bull. That's all I got.
Yeah, bull. I think it's because it's a soft L. It's got a miyaki znak. It's a bull. Okay, so next item is the German aid to Ukraine segment. He was like probably like right about to be ready to go, and then we broke into this long tangent. So my friend Maurice will now present the current state of German aid to Ukraine, which is getting quite substantial. Over to you, German aid to Ukraine.
First of all, hi at all. Actually, I think we should start with Colby and John, didn't we?
We can. Is there? Yeah, sure. We'll do that. So this week we have, of course, our good guest Colby, who is an author and a military analyst. someone who tracks kind of open source information about available U.S. And I imagine other countries' munitions and things. I know the other day he was tracking like the U.S. is making a flurry of arms deals around Europe and other countries, and he's like tracking all those. But so he wrote an article recently for The Insider about cluster munitions for Ukraine and their utility. And this is something I'm also very interested in because I think it's a very like important weapon for Ukraine that they should be given more of. And it seems like a lot of people were interested in it because I put out a little tweet that was just like, hey, my friend Colby made this article and it got a lot of traction. So I was like, hey, Colby, you want to come on and talk about this? Colby said, sure. So here we are. So this is kind of an open discussion. If anyone wants to hop in here, please like interrupt me. So I'm sorry if I'm moving this thing too fast and not giving people room to jump in. So I wanted to start with the like just basic information. So like what are cluster munitions and like not just what are cluster munitions, but also like what are the platforms they come in. In other words, they aren't just like one type of weapon, right? They can be different types. It's more about like how they work. So Colby, could you just explain to the listeners or the viewers what cluster munitions are and kind of?
Sure. So I guess in simplest terms, what most people think of when it comes to artillery ammunition, you have a metal shell, and then it's packed full of a massive high explosive. Historically, like TNT. Although these days there's much more modern compositions of explosive, and cluster munitions, how those differ is that in American terms they call them grenades. So the shell is filled with little grenades or little individual bombs instead of that massive high explosive all inside the shell. So when it's fired as it's approaching target, it disperses all of these little grenades all over the target area rather than the shell just impacting or air bursting and having one big explosion. Instead, you have a bunch of little smaller bombs, which, again, you can call them grenades or you can call them submunitions or bomblets. There's a bunch of different names that are used to describe them. So that's, in most basic terms, what a cluster munition is, or that's an artillery cluster munition specifically. They can be dispersed by aircraft as well with aviation bombs. It's just a big bomb filled with a bunch of little bombs, I guess, is like the most basic explanation.
A cargo shell would be the concise name.
Yeah, cargo shell would be like the proper technical term. Thanks, John. So that's what a cluster munition is in short.
Gotcha. And so obviously they are, we here at Tochnyi want Ukraine to have a lot of these. And I think there's maybe a few particular reasons why. So like why, Colby, and you explain this, of course, in the article. We'll try to throw a link up in the chat for everyone to see the article, by the way. Like why are these munitions in particular useful for Ukraine, and why might we be in position to send a lot of them?
Yeah. So at this point, the most important factor is that there are just a lot of them. The U.S. has quite a significant inventory of these artillery cluster munitions and other ones as well. But the artillery ones, for Ukraine's purposes, are probably the most important because they're their largest quantity of ammunition that's available. And the United States is running shorter on its inventory of those unitary high explosive artillery shells. The United States has provided over 2 million and probably getting closer to 3 million at this point in time of those shells. And so there's just not as many of those available to give to Ukraine, and production of those shells is still not even close to where it needs to be to meet the demand of Ukraine's artillery guns. So there's a huge quantity of these cluster munitions, which in U.S. service, the ones we're talking about are DPI CMs, which is dual purpose improved conventional munition, is the name of them, and dual purpose means both anti-personnel and anti-armor effects. The submunitions, the little bomblets, they can damage armored vehicles and they can kill personnel as well. So that's the dual purpose in the name. So there's a lot of these. Conservatively, 2 million of them, closer to 3 million, really, based on the information we have available. So Ukraine just needs more ammunition, and if these DPCIMs are off the table, then it just severely limits the number of shells that the United States has available to potentially give to Ukraine. And aside from just the quantity, they are useful in a number of different situations. They're not better than alternative types of artillery ammunition, but they are better in certain situations. So if you have large concentrations of enemy forces out in the open, that's a situation in which DPCIMs would be vastly more effective than firing unitary high explosive ammunition. So there are certain situations where they are much more lethal, and given sort of a lot of the Russian tactics on the ground and the way that they're employing their forces, they have been quite effective. So they can be more lethal, and there's a lot of them. So and I get into a lot more depth in the article, so you can read it. But basically, that's sort of a cascading effect. The combination of them being more effective in certain situations and there being a lot of them is a big advantage for Ukrainian artillerymen.
Thanks, Colby. And I guess maybe just very quickly before I'll turn it over to like John, who I think I just wanted to make sure that the audience was on the same page with us in terms of like what are cluster munitions, why are they important, how are they used, and then I think John maybe has some interesting, more interesting things to talk about with the article. But I wanted to ask, because this came up a lot with the mainstream coverage when cluster munitions were first discussed. Just this kind of like humanitarian concern, or this concern about unexploded ordnance and so forth. So I guess if there's anything you wanted to comment about that, or like, do you think there's any kind of special consideration or concern that should be given to these types of weapons, or is it mostly just kind of media noise, a misunderstanding?
Yeah, I didn't get into that specific angle really much in the article. I'll just say that these are very fake, disingenuous concerns about unexploded ordnance. Nobody other than the Ukrainian government has a better appreciation of this challenge that their country is facing. Ukraine is already littered with unexploded ordnance, much of it from cluster munitions, which the Russians have been using. And a lot of the Russian usage has been on civilian areas. So this is a challenge that they're already facing. They very much understand that. And the amount of UXO that's going to be produced potentially by American cluster munitions, which are failing to detonate, is like a minute fraction of the total that already exists in Ukraine, because they've been very heavily used already. And by all available information, the dud rates on the Russian cluster munitions is anywhere from like 40 to even 50%. So a massive number of the submunitions that are being dispensed by the Russians, they fail to detonate, and so they're just lying over the countryside and potentially could explode if somebody accidentally steps on it or picks it up. So that threat is already very much there. So the Ukrainians using them themselves is not going to drastically change that calculation. And the reality is that Ukraine just cannot win this war without them. Like, full stop. It is not possible for Ukraine to defeat Russia if they don't get these cluster munitions, because their artillery their guns will fall silent due to lack of ammunition. And we're already seeing that to happen. It's been a struggle the whole war, but it's becoming particularly acute right now. There's been a lot of reporting in the last month or so about real significant shortages on the front of ammunition, and Ukraine just is not able to win this war if they don't have access to that quantity of DPCIMs from the United States. So that's what I would say to that. And I'll just say again, thank you to the Insider for the opportunity to write this article. And thank you as well to our colleague CJ, who was a big help, and John as well, of course, who always give me a lot of assistance and feedback and whenever I write something. And I didn't have a whole lot of time to write this particular column, but I'm relatively happy with how it turned out, although I did forget to throw one suggestion in that John had provided me. I was up late trying to finish it to send it, and then I sent it off, and then later on I'm like, oh wait, I forgot to write that one extra bit that John told me I should. So maybe he'll mention that angle of another cluster munition that I was going to touch on, because this is more focused on the DPCIMs, which are artillery fired, and then I talk about the new Russian usage of air-launched cluster munitions, and the United States actually has sort of its own system that's broadly analogous to the cluster munitions we're starting to see the Russian Air Force start using. So maybe John can talk about that a little bit if he wants.
Yeah, John, anything you want to talk to Colby about with the article, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the panel. Go ahead, John.
Oh, yeah. So I guess to talk about that elephant in the room, JSOW, I guess it's helpful to kind of back up and take a look at the types of cluster munitions that the United States has or has operated. And broadly speaking, they fall into three-ish categories, or at least, well, let's say four that are relevant to Ukraine. There's DPICM, dual-purpose improved conventional munitions, that come in tube-fired variants, so 155 millimeter, 105 millimeter, as well as I don't think we have any in U.S. service, but there's foreign versions for 120 millimeter mortar systems. We have M26 MLRS, multiple launch rocket system, which is a rocket that dispenses DPICM grenades, compatible with HIMARS and MLRS. Then we have M39 A1 ATACMS that dispense not DPICM, but just standard high explosive anti-personnel bomblets. So they're little spheres, basically. I think those are technically called either just, I think they're just, general purpose improved conventional munitions. APAM, sorry. Is this, yeah. APAM is the specific one for ATACMS. I believe the general term is GPICM, general purpose improved conventional munition, but APAM is the specific one for ATACMS. And then finally, we have JSOW, AGM-154, which is a glide bomb, joint standoff weapon. And what really sets it apart from the others is in U.S. service, a distinction is drawn between submunitions delivered by cargo projectiles, as we would call them, such as shells or rockets, and submunitions delivered via dispensers, which we would associate with airdrop bombs. And the difference is primarily in size. So a M42 or an M46 grenade, the submunition found in DPICM, that'll fit in the palm of your hand. It has about 30 grams of high explosive filler. It'll fit into the, smaller than the palm of your hand. In contrast, take something like JSOW-A, which has 150 or so combined effects bombs, which are they're identical. Well, I shouldn't say identical. They're enormously similar in form and function to DPICM. It's a heat charge with a metal liner that's designed to fragment to produce both anti-armor and anti-personnel effects. But what sets it apart is that whereas a M42 or M46 will fit into the palm of your hand, a combined effects bomb is larger than a soda can and has 300 grams of filler. It has 10 times the explosive mass of what you'd get from tube-fired or rocket dispensed submunitions. It's vastly more destructive. Larger, but it's vastly more destructive. And so in the U.S., that's traditionally been delivered via aircraft. The principal niche that JSOW would fill is not just its greater destructive effect, but it would enable Ukraine to deliver it at standoff distances, JDAM ER ranges and beyond, that they have not really been able to reach with cluster munitions beyond what they were able to touch with their relatively limited supply of M39 ATACMS. which is about out to 160 kilometers or so. So that would really kind of open up this space for Ukraine to not only be able to generate more destructive effects at a time and place of their choosing, but also be able to extend their depth at which they can create these effects at a larger scale. And beyond that, JSOW is particularly interesting because it comes in a number of versions. JSOW-C has a hard target defeat capability. So essentially JSOW essentially has a payload bay that normally submunitions would be stored in, but you can put other payloads in there. So with JSOW-C, we took the Broach warhead from Storm Shadow and we put it in the payload bay. So it has a hard target defeat capability. I'm sure Ukraine could find some use for it, but that isn't necessarily the most useful thing. But what is potentially more useful is that we essentially, as a result of the DoD cluster munition policy that broadly speaking prohibited the use of cluster munitions and other cargo projectiles that had submunitions with dud rates in excess of 1%, we converted a number of the JSOW-As, not all, but a number of them to, I believe, the JSOW-A1, which essentially removed all the cluster munitions from the payload bay, the dispenser, and put in the bomb body from a Mark 52 500-pound general purpose bomb. And what's particularly nice about that is while they already have JDAM-ER, it's just a slap-on glide kit. I mean, for a high altitude, high airspeed release, they'll get at most 70 kilometers from that. In practice, they're getting 40 kilometers because they can't get up to those high altitudes because of Russian ground-based air defenses, as well as obviously Russian CAPS, combat air patrols, by Russian fixed-wing aviation. JSOW being a purpose-built glide bomb, I believe it's 110 kilometers or so for a high-altitude, high airspeed release. So that'll allow them to push that envelope further into the Russian rear in terms of, from say 40 kilometers up to 70 now, just to kind of give some rough numbers. And in terms of, again, the type of effects that they can create, it'll open up unlock a new area of the battle space in the Russian rear where they can, continue to cause destruction.
I wanted to add one thing as well, and it's the fact that any of these systems and also DPICMs will be the most effective when you don't have shortages of other munitions. And unfortunately, what we see now is that Ukraine has shortages of almost everything. So without taking anything away from DPICMs or other cluster munitions, I think it won't achieve the desired effect if we just supply them with that and don't resupply them with 120 mortar munitions, 155s, the necessary airdrop munitions, or laser-guided airdrop munitions or missiles that can basically complete their needs on the battlefield right now. Also, you need all these like long-range strike munitions that can take out the logistics systems in the air as well. And without that, the desired effects will be far from achievable, in my opinion.
I mean, yeah, that's broadly true. I mean, what we've seen anecdotally anyways from Ukrainian UBLs, unit basic loads, which is the sort of the battery level load of ammunition that a artillery or other fires unit would have. What we kind of saw at the beginning was that it was pretty balanced in what you'd expect to see from, say, an U.S. Army, M777 or M119 battery in terms of the type of rounds that have, approximately the percentage of HE you would expect, approximate percentage of DPICM, smoke, illumination, etc. That they had, kind of the standard doctrinal breakdown that we would have, for example, in the U.S. Army, but very quickly, within probably a month or so, at least from the pictures that have kind of been circulating, the percentages kind of just tilted massively to DPICM, like a majority DPICM, minority HE, minimal smoke, minimal illumination. And that's not really ideal because, again, DPICM only creates superior effects to high explosive under certain conditions. Under other conditions, it might just create similar effects. Under other conditions, it may create worse effects. So, it was very, very clear that while perhaps they were at the very beginning of the offensive or immediately prior to it, in late May, early June, they were able to kind of maintain this ideal loadout, but it became apparent very quickly that the DPICM was really just filling space due to lack of HE. That became apparent very, very quickly, both in terms of videos we've seen of Ukrainian fire missions, as well as, again, just images of the UBLs that their artillery that their batteries were doing fire missions with.
So I guess my questions to Colby is also like, what is your opinion on this common talking point that has been lately with too little, too late? How much larger would the effect have been if, let's say, Ukraine got the DPICMs and a certain number of ATACMS missiles with cluster munitions, so that they could have taken out airports, etc. When the start of the offensives was going on, when they actually had some also stocked up munitions in Ukraine, and they probably had a lot more mortar munitions as well. And then I guess I would love to hear Andrew's opinion on that after Colby.
Well, it is kind of unknowable, is it counterfactual, what would have happened if they had all that sooner. We can't say with any certainty, but I'm definitely of the opinion that it would have been very significant, very impactful if they had gotten all of this in large quantity over a year ago, because they didn't just start needing it now. They needed it last year. And once Russia was afforded the opportunity to dig in and deploy the minefields that we've seen and regenerate new combat units, it was going to be very challenging for Ukraine, even with a much larger quantity of material support. So my opinion is that we really needed to be sending all of this in the spring and summer of last year, back when the fighting was much more dynamic and Ukraine actually had some momentum, right? Because Ukraine launched the Kharkiv counteroffensive, and then there was a lot of fighting sort of to the southeast of that on the border of Luhansk, and then obviously there was the Kherson counteroffensive. So during that summer and fall, that's when they really needed to start receiving all of this, the DPCIMs and all the ATACMs, right? Armor, Bradleys, Abrams, Leopards. They needed all of that needed to be delivered way sooner. And if it had, then Ukraine maybe would have been able to maintain some momentum and keep Russia on the back foot. But because we took so long to make those decisions, Russia had all winter to dig in and all spring to keep digging in until the offensive was finally launched, because Ukraine was waiting for those systems to be delivered and for the troops to get trained up on them. So I think if a lot of this had been sent the previous year, things could look really, really different. But now we're in the position where even if we do really escalate the level of material support we give to the Ukrainian army, it's going to be still very challenging, just because the Russians have been given so much time to really prepare very significant defenses. And those defenses, again, even with more material aid, is really challenging the Ukrainians and really demonstrating that on their end, they still have a lot of difficulties within their military in training and command and control, overall organization. There's a lot of problems that are becoming much more glaringly obvious now that they're faced with going up against a much better prepared enemy. And the material support we give is very important, but it can't fix those problems. And it's going to have less of an impact now because the enemy is much better prepared to deal with deal with any material support we give to the Ukrainians.
Yeah, thank you. I tend to agree that I would have liked to seen everything arrive last summer as well. When we look at this year, I'm just like confused about why we see one sort of ammunition popping up at one point, and then another 2 months later, and then 2 months again later. Then we get ATACMS, just 20 missiles, and I just don't see the whole point of it, to be honest. Andrew, what are your perspectives on this?
Yeah, I think by September of last year, it was already too late to supply this stuff. At that point, Russia had already started mobilizing. They were already sending mobilized troops to the front. And those mobilized troops really did a lot to basically stop the Kharkiv offensive. Once they got across the Oskol, they got towards like Novoselivska. You got to keep in mind that basically all the troops that Russia had defending that line were mobilized. I mean, there are instances where Ukraine would capture 20 guys in a basement and interview them, and all 20 of them were from Moscow and had all been mobilized like a week before they were captured. So just things like that happening. By September, it was too late. We had to give this stuff before September, and we really kind of blew that. I don't think giving more equipment would have helped this summer offensive. I think the summer offensive was just badly planned and hopeless. Like I just think it was a bad idea. But it really, the way I see it is that when this offensive, when the summer failed, and we knew it failed by the middle of June, we knew it was a total failure. So I think when we realized it was going to fail, I think the people who were supporting Ukraine, whether it's the United States or Western Europe, we should have really pivoted towards focusing on October and over the winter, and that is another complete failure that we've gone through, because we gave way too many supplies to support a summer offensive that had already failed by the time a lot of those supplies were even given, and we didn't leave anything in reserve for this winter offensive that everybody knew was coming. So it's just been incredibly frustrating to watch this all unfold. It's all been really easy to predict what would happen next, and nobody ever seems prepared for it. And obviously Ukraine gets a lot of the blame for that, because at the end of the day, they're the ones fighting the war. They should have cut their losses in June, but they didn't. They just kept doubling down, and there was a point where Ukraine ran out of ammo this summer, and we supplied them with more ammo, and that was a absolute mistake. That I think that was probably the biggest mistake the United States has made so far.
Okay, thank you. John?
Yeah, so I guess you can break this down really into two separate, related but separate issues, and I'd like to just focus on one. There's the issue of, the amount of these particular munitions or equipment that was supplied at a given time. Was it delivered in large quantities up front, or was it a more steady trickle, or even just a steady flow? Kind of the effects of those approaches raises different questions. And then there's also the separate issue of, should we have delivered this stuff just earlier? Not necessarily, in a large quantity up front or as a trickle over time, but just should we have done it earlier to begin with? In terms of that, focusing on DPICM specifically, what I would say is that, broadly speaking, is that, delivering it now, or actually delivering it this summer, or, late spring, early this summer, or delivering it last spring, it would have had a similar immediate effect in the sense that Russian offensive potential would have been stunted immediately by the presence of DPICM and its just vastly greater lethality against, infantry, soft, lightly armored vehicles. I mean, even battle tanks, et cetera, out in the open in groups. The initial, that alpha effect, if you will, would have been similar, but the difference long term would have been that, if it had been given last spring, Ukraine would have been able to be a lot more economic with how they approach their fire missions because they would have had the full set of tools available to them. So, for example, they could have chosen not to expend large numbers of HE rounds against Russian personnel in the open. They could have used DPICM. They could have chosen not to use HE for counterfire missions. They could have used DPICM against, Russian fires assets or, other, area targets. And so what that would have enabled is, rather than having this reliance on HE, which isn't necessarily well optimized for all, conceivable target sets, and then suddenly relying on DPICM, which likewise is not optimized for, the full spectrum of target sets, you would have had them from the beginning being able to optimize their fire missions and the effects they want to create based upon, the targets they are attempting to suppress, neutralize, or destroy. They could, that would have enabled them to, in the long term, be much more parsimonious with, their ammunition consumption. And we'd be in a position likely right now where, I'm sure ammunition would still be a major difficulty right now, but rather than being almost out of HE and relying on DPICM, they would have similar amounts in absolute combined, but they'd have a nice balance. They'd still be running out, but at least they'd be running out with an optimal mixture that they can still create good effects across the full target spectrum in the meantime until we get this sorted out. And I mean, we can extend this to other systems like, say, ATACMS, or I don't want to use Storm Shadow because that took like 7 months to actually physically integrate, and that was a genuinely long-term project. But some of these things, it's similar. Like, let's say ATACMS. Let's say we had delivered a large number last spring. It would have had an enormous immediate destructive effect on the Russians, just like if it had been delivered in large quantities last month or the month before. But the beneficial long-term impact is that the Russians are going to adapt. They're going to adapt in various ways to all of these systems, these assets, these capabilities. But those adaptations potentially force them to operate in less efficient ways. So take the Ka-52s, for example. Previously, prior to ATACMS, they were able to operate from large, heliports, and you have 20, 30 helicopters at each. If you centralize all your sustainment, maintenance, and repair, rearming, refueling, etc., you get pretty substantial gains in efficiency of sustainment from doing that. Now that ATACMS are in theater, they've had to disperse to, say, 3, 4, maybe 5 helicopters at a bunch of different FARPs, forward arming and refueling points, that, they're still able to continue operations, but it's much less efficient now because they don't have those centralized logistics and sustainment. The Russians would have adapted to that, if we had provided ATACMS in April, May, June of last year, and, the Ukrainians had used them to destroy a bunch of Ka-52s like they did, this past month or so. The Russians would have made that adaptation, but their Ka-52 operations would then have been less efficient and effective for basically the past year now. So I think that's the perspective that we need to take, is that the upfront effect that delivery of these systems would create would probably be similar, regardless if we had delivered them now as we did, or if we had delivered them a year beforehand. But if they had been delivered earlier, there would have been cumulative long-term degradations that the Russian force would have suffered that would have lowered their, effective combat potential just passively, for the past year. And overall, the balance of power would be that much more in Ukraine's favor as a result. So it's subtle, but, in general, delivering the stuff, a year and a half ago would have been substantially beneficial because of that.
Okay, guys, I know Colby has to get going relatively soon, so I just maybe wanted to see if there's any maybe concluding thoughts. Colby, is there anything you feel like maybe we didn't touch on in the discussion in the article? You go into a little more detail about Soviet cluster munitions, I know, but is there anything else you maybe want the listeners to take away from this discussion?
No, I think we've covered it all. Ukraine needs more ammunition. That's kind of the bottom line. Read the article. I mean, I couldn't possibly summarize every point in a short period of time. So if people are interested in the topic, please do read the article, share, and yeah, that's about it. And I have to get going in the next 20 minutes maybe. So.
Yeah, thanks, Colby, for coming on and sharing your thoughts about the article with us. We do appreciate it, and I would recommend everyone take a read. As Colby outlines, this is like a very significant weapon type for Ukraine that we have a lot of lying around, and we really there's very few rational arguments not to give these to Ukraine, in my opinion. And Colby here, I wanted to maybe, because we had a couple questions in chat, and also we thought we should give maybe a little general update, which is just U.S. funding for Ukraine stuff. We did a stream on this, I think last week or a week and a half ago. So I recommend you check that out if you're totally confused about like the basics. But we just want to give like an update on that. So John, did you want to just share what's going on?
Right. So the House of Representatives, they went into recess for their Christmas recess into the new year on December 15th, so 2 days ago. The Senate went into a 2-day recess, I believe, or that was the original plan. And then they currently intend to reconvene on December 18th, tomorrow, Monday, to resume negotiations between the Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans, and the White House on a compromise Senate bill for the supplemental appropriations bill, full title National Security and Border Act of 2024. That's what contains the various funding for Ukraine in terms of increasing their presidential drawdown authority cap, appropriating fundings for USAI, Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, as well as funding for the FMF program, foreign military financing. So that's going to be grants, loans, loan guarantees to Ukraine and European allies. All of that's in the supplemental appropriations bill, along with replenishment funding to restock DoD inventory of the defense articles that we have drawn down and transferred to Ukraine via PDA. So as it stands right now, they're going to resume those negotiations on Monday. Based upon reading Punch Bowl and the usual sort of Capitol Hill reporting, they're making progress. It's slow going, but the Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats are substantially moving forward with what they think is a compromise with direct White House involvement. That's positive, though the comments have been pretty clear that this is a slow process. It's going to take them a while to get there. The Senate Republicans, for their part, they have said they will not agree to the compromise until they have an actual framework text. So there's not going to be any kind of verbal or conceptual compromise they agree to. They want it in writing substantially. So it's going to take some time to get there. That said, I think they will get there. Colby might want to speak to this as well. But I'm reasonably confident those three groups will all reach a compromise. The issue is the House Republican caucus specifically getting a compromise bill between the final Senate bill and then the House Republican caucus is going to be a extreme challenge to find some middle ground that retains everything for Ukraine, has an acceptable amount of border stuff for the House Republican caucus, while also not having too much that the Senate Democrats won't pass it, or that, obviously Biden won't endorse it. So the Venn diagram of the three of those overlapping is going to be a severe challenge. The House is, as I said, in recess until the new year. Speaker Johnson has said that he is willing to reconvene the House if Biden is, willing to negotiate with him directly. Thus far, that does not appear to have happened. It seems that the White House has chosen to pursue working out a compromise first with the Senate and then turning to the House after that. In principle, per whatever article of the Constitution that I can't remember the number of, Biden does have the ability to reconvene Congress. That hasn't been done in decades. The last one I know of is Harry Truman in 46, 47, maybe it was 48. Yeah. And so that's very unlikely to happen, but I guess it's possible, though obviously Biden hasn't given any inclination that he'll do that. And so that's where we are. We're currently stuck in limbo. Currently, there's about, I think, 4.6? Colby, correct me on that. Left in drawdown authority. And we have to basically make that last for however long it takes to pass the supplemental, assuming it passes, of course. So what we've currently been seeing is drawdowns on the order of 300 to 400 million per month, that'll keep the lights on in Ukraine, just very barely, questionably so, until the end of the year, if need be. It's pretty clear that the White House has picked this amount in the event so they have enough to ration through the rest of through calendar year 2024 in the event the supplemental appropriations bill doesn't pass. It seems pretty clear that's their approach at this point. They're hedging their bets. But yeah, we're currently just kind of in limbo waiting for these negotiations to happen, really.
Thanks, John. Colby, anything to add in terms of updates since the stream?
Yeah, 4.6 is correct. 4.625 to be exact is the amount that's remaining in executable drawdown authority. There's not going to be a agreement reached this month, just to be super explicit about that in case anybody was still confused or holding out some sort of shred of hope. It's not going to happen this month. As John was saying, there's still a fair bit of distance between both sides of the negotiation on the Senate side. And again, as John said, the most important question here is the House, and the House has not been included in these negotiations at all. So whatever the president agrees to with the Senate, the House still has to as well agree to that. And whatever the Senate comes up with, it's very much an open question whether the House will be willing to take that up and put it to a vote. I know that a lot of Senate Republicans have been saying they don't want to come up with a deal that is not likely to pass the House of Representatives, but without the House actually being included in negotiations, it's kind of difficult to determine, whether it's likely that they will come up with something that's going to be agreeable to the House. So it's not going to happen over Christmas. I don't anticipate Biden recalling Congress, and if he did, it would not help again as well. Most likely, the House would not take kindly to the president calling them back into session to take up this bill, which they have not been invited participants to the negotiations of. So this is going to have to get sorted out in January. The Senate's going to continue their work next week, and perhaps longer. I don't know. But there won't be any sort of legislation actually on the table to vote for until January at the absolute soonest. There'll be whenever the House is reconvening, which is like probably a week into January or so.
So the other thing to consider here is we don't know what the White House's internal strategy is for approaching these negotiations. There's two ways to approach this. There's obviously the probably say the most straightforward, but the most obvious and direct would be to simply get the House Republicans, or a majority of them, and Speaker Johnson on board, via a compromise bill at the House, and then have that voted on in the House. It's possible the White House might, either currently or as an eventuality, choose to pursue the discharge petition route and completely do a runaround of the House Republican caucus. And essentially, they can force a vote on this in the House floor, even if the Speaker doesn't table it. If they get an absolute majority of members of the House to sign a piece of paper discharging it to the floor for a vote. If they got, a compromise with the Senate that's acceptable to Senate Republicans, the Senate Democrats, in the White House, and then they get every House Democrat to sign that, And then if they wait into the new year, once Representatives McHenry and McCarthy resign and the Republican majority drops to 2, it's conceivable they could get the 2 or 3 Republican representatives that are, there's some of them that are, still very staunchly pro-Ukraine, to get them to sign the piece of paper, force a discharge petition, and vote on it on the floor, and essentially run around, do an end run around the process. That's sort of the nuclear option, but it's possible that, the administration is keeping, the administration and, the House Democrat caucus and Hakeem Jeffries are keeping that as an option in their back pocket. And I would strongly suspect that they are, to be honest.
Yeah, I haven't seen any reporting, any sort of chatter at all about whether the discharge petition route is something that is even being conceived of at this juncture. So perhaps we'll see more about that in January if it looks like there's still the House is not agreeable to whatever the Senate comes up with, then maybe there will be some backroom efforts to try and get that to happen. But at this juncture, I don't know that any members of the House Republican Conference are interested in doing a discharge petition with the Democrats to pass this. And it's also, I think, very incorrect to assume that such an effort even would get a majority, or would get every House Democrat to vote for it, because this is a omnibus supplemental that includes aid for Ukraine and Israel as well as the border as well. And there's going to be border policy changes within this bill. There will be a number of House Democrats that are not going to vote for this bill because of either the border provisions or the Israel aid provisions, or both. So I think that severely complicates the discharge petition route, because there will be not a trivial number of Democratic defections over those two issues, which means that the number of Republicans who would have to agree to go around the speaker will rise considerably. So that's probably explains why we haven't been hearing so much about that potential route, because I don't know that that's actually any sort of shortcut. It's not. I don't know that it's a practical or feasible shortcut around the speaker for that reason. So I think they are going to have to come to an agreement that the speaker and other House Republican leadership and House Democratic leadership are able to come to an agreement with the Senate on.
I mean, it's also possible the other radical approach here would be to just, for the Senate to generate a new legislative vehicle and just scrap the supplemental entirely and break it up into multiple separate bills, like, say, split Ukraine off separately or split Ukraine and Israel off separately. And that's possible. I doubt they'll do it this late into the negotiation stage, and they'll take some practical time to do. But I guess that is a possibility if, again, as a contingency, if things were of a concern enough that the supplemental in its current form would not get passed by the House and a discharge petition became non-viable.
Yeah, and the other problem with that is procedurally, that is vastly, vastly more time-consuming. It will take up so many legislative days to pass these as separate pieces of legislation, and Congress does not have any time at all to be doing that, because they still have to get the annual appropriations bills passed, because if that doesn't happen, then we go back to the budget sequestration, and there's top line cuts on everything, including defense, and that means that it's all game over. The U.S. will be essentially destined to lose a potential war with China if that were to happen. And Ukraine will also be doomed as well if the U.S. got had the defense budget shaved by 50 or 60 billion, whatever it is. It's game over for everybody if that happens. So they have to get the supplemental passed quickly, but they have to get the annual appropriations bills passed extremely quickly as well. January, February, it's all going to be very, very busy in the amount of legislation that they have to get passed.
Okay, so thank you, Colby and John. We have a question, and I think it says it's for Colby, but I think I will ask both Colby and Andrew on this. So, if the US would reduce its military aid and new aid will not be approved, etc., on what should the US focus the most, because it would be the most relevant military aid for Ukraine? I'll ask Andrew first and then Colby. If Andrew can hear us.
Sorry. I'm not really sure, to be honest. There are a lot of moving parts here because there are allies that are kind of on the cusp of being able to supply certain things, but they're not there yet. And it really depends on how close they are to delivering those things. If they're very close, I think they could even potentially out-deliver whatever the United States could. But if they're very far, then obviously the United States has to pick it up. So there's just too many moving parts. I don't know.
Colby, what's your opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, this just takes us back to the cluster munitions, right? So, what are the capabilities that the United States has that only the United States can deliver because other countries don't have these capabilities? The cluster munitions, DPCIMs, Ukraine, should be given at least 1 million of those if it was up to me. I would give them 2 million, to be honest with you, and that is quite possibly getting to the point where that could compromise some operational plans that the U.S. has, namely as it pertains to North Korea. But these are things that the United States has to accept if Ukraine is going to win, which, in my view, is one of the single most important things for America's and NATO's security interest is for Ukraine to win. The compromises and the difficult decisions are only going to get more difficult because so much time has been wasted in providing things that should have been provided a long time ago. So millions of DPICMs, 1,200 ATACMs, which are officially expired. And there's been a fair bit of reporting that at least the APAM ones were removed from operational requirement. That's been reported on a few times. The Pentagon has said that or told reporters that. So, but 1,200 ATACMs, that's a good starting point that should be provided. And then with the balance of whatever drawdown authority is left after that, the United States just has to have a conversation with Ukraine and ask them, what is it most important for you guys to get from us? Because once that authority is exhausted, the ability of the United States to continue to provide assistance is going to be very limited. So I would expect that PAC-3 MSE missiles would also be a priority for them to receive. And beyond that, I don't know, whatever the Ukrainian General Staff wants. I'm going to have to leave it there now. I have to drop. I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you. I think Colby's getting a phone call. He had somewhere to be. He said 90 minutes into the broadcast. So we appreciate you, Colby, for coming in, to talk about your article, to also update us on the current situation in Washington. There's one other question. It was for John and Colby, but of course Colby had to go. I just wanted to ask, if Congress fails to pass more aid, John, are there other options for Biden to continue aid through other means?
Yes, I think there were two questions about this, one from Kellen Dunn, the other from Oimbubi, or however that's pronounced. So I guess I'll address both of those kind of together. Well, I know Colby just spoke to both those. Well, the second one, sorry. So in terms of options that would be left to us, there's not many. So Lend-Lease, the Ukraine Democracy Defense Lend-Lease Act of 2022 was not reauthorized in the NDAA, in the final conference version of the National Defense Authorization Act, which just passed Congress, both houses the other day. that is problematic because Lend-Lease, so it expired at the end of fiscal year 2023, so October 1st of this year, and has been expired since then. That was our backup mechanism in the event that PDA was exhausted. The Ukrainian government, the ambassador, they visited the White House, they visited Congress, and specifically requested of both parties and of the president that this provision be included in the bill as an emergency option. The House had a provision doing so in their version of the NDAA. The Senate did not. When they got together for the conference committee to resolve the differences between the Senate and the House versions of the NDAA bill, the amendment that inserted the clause reauthorizing Lend-Lease was struck, so that's gone. It is possible to lend defense articles under the terms of the Arms Export Control Act and the Foreign Assistance Act as is, without Lend-Lease, but there's a lot of procedural hurdles that are attached to it. And the most problematic is that Ukraine would have to pay us back in 5 years, and they won't be able to. It'll bankrupt them. It'll destroy their economy if they have to do that. That was the main principal advantage of Lend-Lease, is it cleared some procedural red tape, and it also removed the 5-year limit on the duration of loans and repayment. So we could essentially, instead of giving them a 5-year loan for Abrams, we could have given them a 50-year loan or a 75-year loan. And then they could have just repaid us, in basically like a century, and where it wouldn't have a major impact on their economy. That option's gone now. So that's very problematic, although technically, leases and loans are possible, just very restrictive ones. Once PDA is exhausted, that's kind of the end of the line. USAI is already exhausted. FMF, I think, is already exhausted as well, the Foreign Military Financing Program. The only thing left would be the Excess Defense Articles Program, and there's been discussion of using this program, most of it incorrect. I know certain individuals on Twitter were claiming that the DoD or the president can zero out the value of defense articles. They can't. That's false. That's made up. That's not how this works. There's this prescribed valuation procedure as expressed in I don't think it's explicitly laid out in the Code of Federal Regulations. It's in a DoD financial management book somewhere that I have to go find. But anyways, there's a specific valuation procedure that's used for these. The issue with using the Excess Defense Articles Program, and for those that aren't familiar, it's a program that allows the U.S. to transfer defense articles which are deemed, quote, excess to DoD operational requirements. So it's a way for us to, rather than having to pay for the disposal and demilitarization of old defense articles ourselves, we can essentially get rid of them by donating them, as a grant for free to foreign countries. There's a couple issues with using it for Ukraine. They're all enormously serious practical and political challenges and policy challenges. The first is that while there are some things we could transfer to Ukraine under EDA normally, like say old Humvees, maybe some old Bradleys, the issue is the overwhelming majority of items that Ukraine needs, I'd say probably 90 to 95%, would require items that are in fact not in excess of DoD operational requirements. So it's things that we actually need. So strictly speaking, creatively using the EDA program would be an explicit violation of federal law, so it's illegal. That's the first issue. Obviously, you can make an argument, well, who's going to enforce it? Well, the risk is always that Congress could just amend the Foreign Assistance Act to, completely, remove the EDA program from federal law itself. So that's kind of the issue there, is that transferring most of the stuff that Ukraine needs via EDA would be illegal. And the risk is that Congress could just, legally, get rid of the EDA program in response. That's the first risk. The second is that even for the stuff that we can legally send under EDA, which again isn't very much, it's a tiny, minuscule fraction of what Ukraine needs and what we're currently providing under PDA, Presidential Drawdown Authority, is that we can't pay for any of it. So a lot of it's in really bad shape. Ukraine would have to pay to have it refurbed, basically. Like the Bradleys that we've donated to other countries, the Humvees, the old FMTVs. The recipient country, while we're legally prohibited for charging them for EDA grants, they usually have to pay us to refurb it because they're just in bad shape and not in working condition usually. So again, the very limited amount of stuff that we could legally transfer, probably, I'm not sure. We'd have to find some place to get the money to refurb and bring it to operable condition again. And we ourselves have no sources for that money. The third issue is that associated with PDA, Presidential Drawdown Authority, because it's drawing down defense articles that are necessary for DoD operational requirements, they need to be replaced. There needs to be money that the DoD has, or appropriations from Congress, to buy replacement defense articles, either a new copy of that defense article to replace it directly, or something else. We need money to buy replacement shells to restock our own inventory, or in the case of some of the M777s, we're going to replace some of them directly, and others are going to replace by buying more HIMARS. The issue is there will be no such funding associated with EDA. So whereas, up till now, when the DoD has made transfers using Presidential Drawdown Authority, they've had the confidence that, we have, this $25 billion total. Most of it's already been committed now, but, going into this, they had $25 billion in appropriations from Congress that they could spend however they chose to, begin to contract to replace all of these defense articles that we've donated. So this minimizes the long-term impact on our own, capabilities and readiness, across our various global commitments. The issue with PDA is there will be no money. There will be no replenishment funding. So basically, if let's say we transfer $10 billion worth of defense articles to Ukraine under EDA, that's a $10 billion hole in our defense budget. That's it. We're just down $10 billion in the hole. If we send them 100 Abrams, that's just 100 Abrams gone. We'll never get the money back to replace those. And the issue is politically, if the DoD goes and says, says to Congress, hey, we need replenishment funding to replace the stuff we transfer under EDA, the logical response is for Congress to go, well, why do you need the money? It's supposed to be access to requirements only, So, in other words, if we were to transfer large volumes of things under EDA and then ask for funding, that would just be a direct admission the program was unlawfully used, and which gets back to the issues of point one, that Congress could very easily just remove the program from federal law altogether. So it's not really a viable approach. It's incredibly dangerous, in fact, both politically as well as defense policy, because again, we will just be tearing a gargantuan hole in our defense budget that will basically guarantee we lose a future war to China and a lot of other really bad stuff. So the short answer here is that once PDA runs out, that we're done. That's basically it. There's not really much we can do beyond that. We can try to do some of the leases and the loans, but we're basically out of options. The only other thing at that point would be for somebody to give Ukraine a lot of money to maybe do FMS orders or direct commercial, foreign military sales from the U.S. to buy things with money donated by, say, European allies, or to do direct commercial sales with U.S. defense contractors to likewise buy things with funding provided by European allies. That would really be kind of the only contingency we're talking about here. Other than that, we're out of options once PDA is gone and if the supplemental doesn't get passed.
Okay, thank you, John. Before we move to the last question from Kelly, I have a DM or question I got in DM. So it's, how does the everyday person help, or how can, I guess, the everyday person help and get this moving? I have not heard the whole show, but can John answer this so that people can take action, I guess, in a way? How can we turn this into something positive? I know there are several people and groups working inside the Capitol, but what can the everyday person do?
So, and this is really only applicable to the Americans listening. The only thing we really can do directly is, just call the offices of your senators, your representative, etc. Call them if they have an electronic messaging service to you leave your thoughts or opinions. I think most of them have that. Do that as well. just let them know that it's incredibly important to you that assistance to Ukraine gets passed, and that you potentially can't support them in a general election or upcoming primary challenge potentially, if they don't take definitive action to get support for Ukraine enacted into law expeditiously, etc. That's really the only thing that can be done directly. I mean, in terms of European audience, I mean, just do the same thing with your government, obviously, with your representatives and your legislatures, however it's structured. Obviously, what happens in the U.S. isn't, that's beyond your control, but, just continue advocating, to your representatives, your deputies, however it's implemented in your country for more assistance to Ukraine. I mean, that's really the only thing that we can do directly to influence these processes and events.
Okay, thank you. And then we have, I guess, maybe one more question before going further. But yeah, Kellen asks, can the AFU effectively take out our Russian military sites inside Russia to prevent missile attacks, etc.? And I guess there are two ways to answer this. Can they do it with long-range strike capabilities, either if Ukraine already have them, or if we can supply them, or if they can do it in some other way?
So in terms of long-range strike, they currently don't have much ability to do so. I mean, they have the one-way attack UAVs, but that's about it. Obviously, there's a total moratorium on the use of Western-provided security assistance, or defense articles, I should say, inside of Russia. That's mainly a policy position taken by the U.S. and I think Germany as well. That have been primarily driving this, basically that we've kind of browbeat everybody else into doing the same or making the same requirement. So yeah, I mean, the only other thing would be to develop an indigenous long-range strike capability, short-range to medium-range ballistic missile systems, land attack cruise missiles. All of that takes time. They have Neptune in very limited quantities, but that's about the sum of it, aside from the one-way attack UAVs. So in general, the answer to the question is they don't really have the capability to, not currently anyways. And obviously there's, things that can be done with partisans, direct action by special operations elements in Russia, etc. That's all possible. And I mean, that matters, but I mean, it's a very small scale thing.
Yeah, so the thing is, essentially, Ukraine got certain long-range strike capabilities like Storm Shadow and Scalp EG, and also some ATACMS missiles and other systems like General Gimlers that can strike inside Russia, but they've basically been banned or barred from doing so by some of the main countries that are donating weapons to Ukraine. So it's basically crippling the effect further from receiving systems too late and too little, not synchronized, and also not giving them the possibility to strike munitions depots or training facilities or command centers or launch facilities within Russia, which some of these systems in theory can do, at least to some of the targets, right? And it's crippling the effect. And I guess I want Andrew to comment on that as well before we move to the next question. And then after that, I think we have to move to the next segment.
Yeah, I don't know. See, one thing that I've wanted to say throughout this conversation is that we have to kind of think about what Ukraine's goal is for 2024, because I think their goal is very different than it was for this year. I think their goal next year will be to basically survive the year. I think they're going to need to hold the line as best as they can. They're going to have to force Russia to culminate this offensive, which I don't think Russia is anywhere close to that yet. I think that there's a good chance that Ukraine could end up losing a lot more ground before that happens. I think these are kind of the goals that we have to be thinking about in the back of our head when we think about what sort of weapons could go to Ukraine and what capabilities they require. Because right now, the capabilities they require is survival. I don't really think they have the luxury of thinking about more than that right now. The offensive this summer kind of eliminated that luxury. So I just think that this is kind of the thing that you should hold in the back of your head whenever you think about what is going to be going on in 2024. Because I really doubt there's going to be a big offensive. I really hope there isn't. I hope they learned from this year. And I think Ukraine should have their primary goal should be to hold the line as best as they can. And their secondary goal should be to destroy as much Russian equipment as possible. And hopefully by the end of next year, Russia will start being very low on the armor they require to do these offensive actions. Because Russia does have a finite amount of armor, and they have a finite amount of artillery pieces as well. And this really should be Ukraine's two priorities.
Yeah, degrading Russian military capabilities is probably going to be very high in focus. I suggest we do a separate stream just on this topic before the new year, maybe between Christmas and New Year, because I think we can talk about it for 2 hours, and hopefully we'll get some of you guys on. The last question before we go to Germany to Ukraine that I will take up is from Torben, and I guess I'm gonna ask Joseph and John and Andrew about this as well. What's your take on speculations that US / NATO doesn't really want Russia to lose all that badly? So basically, this notion that the US and some countries in Europe have been afraid of the possibility of a Russian military collapse that could lead to a regime collapse.
So I think it's a fair question based on kind of like how events have unfolded. I think it's fair to say that there is, I would suggest maybe a minority of people that are animated by, maybe not solely by this thinking or even primarily by this thinking, but that do have this in the back of their mind that an unstable Russia permanently in some way is a scary thing they want to prevent, right? And like that's sort of understandable in a general sense. Whether or not that translates though to like how direct policy has been approached when it comes to giving Ukraine the ability to defend itself. I think there's also maybe this allegation, there's like a conspiracy that like, oh, the US is like letting like Russia stay in Ukraine to like degrade the army further and further, right? So I don't really think so. I think that when it comes to like actions on the ground in terms of us helping like Ukraine and the equipment that's being given, I don't really see this like slow rolling as like a deliberate strategy by the West, like some kind of 3D chess. I wouldn't give us that much credit. Basically, I would say it's more or less just dragging our feet on things that are essential that we need. And I think it was made pretty clear by like John and Colby, right? We're precariously even funding our own military to prevent basic threats to our own national security, like China, right? So I totally understand this kind of question or this impulse to raise this, and I understand the like larger like issue there, but I wouldn't say that there's any demonstrable like link between how this is all unfolded and like this line of thinking. I don't think this is like the dominant line of thinking in US or European policy circles personally. Andrew?
I agree. I don't think that is really high on anyone's mind. And just to be frank, we could be giving Ukraine probably 5 times as much equipment as we're giving without giving them the ability to push Russia back. And then we would be degrading Russia even faster. If our goal was really just to degrade the Russian military, we could achieve that goal even better by giving more. So I don't think that's it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the theory that like we are degrading them, for Russian military purposes is like we could definitely do more. Sorry, but we really need to move to the German aid to Ukraine segment. It's very late in Germany.
Please, John, and then Quick, and then Germany.
Yeah, just very briefly, what I'd say is I think it's more of a practical challenge. It's sort of it's a chicken and the egg scenario or a self-fulfilling prophecy, depending on how you want to look at it in terms of how I've been looking at it. I mean, I can't speak for Europe. I'm sure there's probably some factions in Europe that are probably like genuinely, don't want Russia to collapse. That wouldn't shock me in the slightest. The U.S. government certainly does have some concerns there. I know it is, it came up a lot when the Soviet Union dissolved. The U.S. government is gets very, very edgy when you start talking about potential collapses of nuclear weapon states. That's something they get extremely terrified of for kind of obvious reasons. But I suspect it's more so the practical realities that the invasion did not go how we anticipated it would go at the very beginning. Ukraine did not get steamrolled in the first 72 hours. So we had kind of a plan to like enable a Ukrainian guerrilla movement, and we're kind of just left there, trying to figure out how to support a full-blown conventional industrialized war. And we never really had a strategy to do so. And probably the biggest impediment is that, we probably needed to ask Congress for not like, $15 billion in 2022. We needed to ask them for like $200 billion between PDA, USAI to really get, basically the U.S. defense industrial base going at the level needed to sustain such a massive war effort very quickly. That type of ask, I mean, Biden probably would have gotten more if he had presented a coherent plan from Congress, but he probably wouldn't have gotten that much. And that's kind of the dilemma that I think we face is that, the amount of money that we need to really wrap this up in an expedient manner with a decisive Ukrainian victory was always probably going to be vastly more money than Congress was willing to give. And the administration, for sure, they could have definitely approached it better, but just the political environment in the U.S. this was not an ideal time for this war to break out, in other words, in terms of the political will that we could muster to make really probably the hundreds of billions of dollars in appropriations that we would have needed to make to, really begin to bring this thing to a close decisively over a 2 to 3 year period.
Thanks, John. Thanks everyone for your questions. We'll try to maybe at the end of the stream hit some more questions. And we got our friend Bianati also is in Ukraine. We're going to touch base with him, see if there's any updates he can give us. But it's very late in in Germany, also Ukraine. So we want to do the German Aid to Ukraine weekly report without further ado. My good friend, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for valuing my time. It's 10 p.m. So I try to make it short, but just as a quick info for all who's interested in the whole US aid situation. About 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago, we made a stream together with the John Rich account, for example, about the whole situation, about 2 hours long. So yeah, please check that out if you're interested. So, Roderich Kiesewetter, a politician from the opposition party CDU, made public on Thursday, that the German government responded to a formal inquiry by him that no expert opinion, like an official expert report or legal analysis, had been commissioned since May 2023 to clarify any unresolved legal issues regarding a possible Taurus delivery to Ukraine. I'm still waiting for the official document to be released so I can have a look at it and verify his statement. But if that's true, and I don't see a reason he should lie about this, this means that either the argument of legal issues made by Scholz is not true, or that he don't want to resolve it at the moment. Also on Thursday, a total of 3,700 laptops for Ukrainian school children in the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, I hope I said that correctly, have been donated by various tax offices, ministries, and companies in the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia. The donated laptops will enable children and teenagers whose schools have been destroyed to take part in digital education as a replacement for the normal school day. The laptops were handed over to the German-Ukrainian Association Blau-Gelbes Kreuz e.V., which will carry out the transport, which has already started on the same day. As a last item of Thursday, it became public that the German Bundeswehr is training Ukrainian soldiers at the Bremerhaven Naval Operations School. In the Survival at Sea training program, soldiers are being prepared for extreme situations at sea. Although it is said that the Ukrainians are also taught other skills in addition to the survival training, what exactly these skills are is being kept a secret. After weeks, the renegotiations on the 2024 federal budget were concluded on Wednesday. Chancellor Scholz has addressed the German Bundestag and said that the 8 billion euros in military aid for Ukraine will come. Germany will have to do more if others stop giving aid, and support for Ukrainian refugees in Germany worth at least 6 billion euros is planned for the year. Now, the Bundestag's budget committee will discuss it and, after all, also approve it. The Bundestag will then convene in January for the budget week and approve the 2024 budget. After that, only the Bundesrat has to give the green light. And for those who are wondering, the remaining steps should be only a formality. Also on Wednesday, a spokesperson of the German Luftwaffe has confirmed to me that Germany has now delivered the second Patriot battery to Ukraine, which Chancellor Scholz had pledged in October. The training of the Ukrainian soldiers ended in early December after just a couple of weeks. The now delivered system consists of a fire control station, a radar unit, 8 launchers, and around 60 missiles. On the same day, the German government made public that since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in February last year, they have provided Ukraine with 27.8 billion euros in bilateral aid alone. That's a plus of 3.8 billion euros in aid since the last update made in September. A day later, the German government updated the list of military assistance to Ukraine and confirmed the delivery of the Patriot battery also on their list. They also made public that they have, apart from the Patriot battery, delivered the following to Ukraine in the past week: 9 Bandwagen 206, 4 semi-trailers for HX-81 tank transporters, 8 Mercedes-Benz Zetros water and fuel tank trucks, 4 vehicles, around 7,300 or 7,400 155 artillery shells, around 47,000 rounds of 40mm ammunition for automatic grenade launchers, 3 mobile remote-controlled and protected demining machines, and 14 drone detection sensors. 47 Toyota Land Cruiser were also pledged to be delivered in the future. On the same day, the German Ministry of Defense announced that they are financing the delivery of 68,000 155 artillery shells from a French defense company to Ukraine for 278 million euros. A further 282,000 shells can be ordered, procured, and delivered via the framework agreement. Other countries can also participate in the project as it's part of the EU's 1 million shell pledge. And when I understand that correctly, this basically means that at least this French company alone had the capacity to deliver 350,000 shells to Ukraine, and no one was ordering something, at least until we did. I reported on Friday that the German-Ukrainian Association Bamberg UA has financed and equipped a bus for medical treatment and evacuation, which is soon to be delivered to Ukraine. The remaining space inside the vehicle is packed with other aid. For example, children in forages receive small Christmas presents. Also on Friday, the Federal Ministry of the Interior and Community reported in a press release which winter-related aid is currently being prepared and is in execution right now. A total of 500 power generators, which are to be used mainly at the frontline areas of Ukraine, are being prepared right now. Some of them have already been delivered. Also in preparation is the delivery of 900 heaters, 1,700 winter sleeping bags, winter clothing, and a mobile field kitchen. 2 drinking water treatment plants will also be handed over shortly to ensure that the population continues to have access to clean water. Together with the mayor of Berlin, Berlin's municipal waste disposal service handed over 3 waste collection vehicles to Berlin's twin city Kyiv on Friday. Also on Friday, a survey of the Politbarometer by the German ZDF was published. According to the survey, 68% of Germans surveyed want further military support for Ukraine from the West. Of these, also 35% would even see greater support. Yesterday, Germany's Minister of Finance, Christian Lindner, said in an interview that Germany is already paying 50% of EU aid to Ukraine right now, although Germany would only have to contribute 25%, so half of that. He also indicated that Germany could and would do more if needed. And for those who are wondering, we all know Ukraine needs more aid. Of course, it's needed. He means that in a way, if others don't support Ukraine anymore or support less, then Germany will step in. And we're ending this new segment with a donation of 20 ambulances to the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. The German government donated these vehicles together with the World Health Organization to ensure emergency medical care when transporting patients to hospitals under wartime conditions. And this was this week's summary of German aid to Ukraine.
Thank you very much, my friend. So we have one question in chat that's related, and then maybe I have a question for you. If you have time, you need to get going, or
No, it's fine. I try to answer.
Okay, beautiful. So the question from Kellen is, can Germany pick up most of the weapons aid if the U.S. fails to pass the supplemental package we discussed previously? I would maybe quickly add to that to maybe give you more to respond to. It seems like the Bundeswehr has 2 jobs, right? Or Germany has 2 jobs. They have to re-equip the Bundeswehr, that they've committed to that, and support Ukraine. And can they do both, right? Go ahead.
I think that highly depends on which aid we are talking about. Like specific aid, like cluster ammunition, for example, is not possible. We destroyed our stockpiles in November 2015, when I remember right. And also, although Germany is doing a lot, no country, in my opinion, no single country can replace the US as a military aid donor to Ukraine. At least when the US is really stepping in and doing what they have done last year. Most of the aid from Germany comes from the industry, not from the army stocks, which is totally understandable, at least from our standpoint, which basically means that most of the aid needs time to be refurbished, to be produced, and most of the US aid, when I see that right, comes from stocks and not from the industry, which means the delivery time is just way shorter with the US. And if we deliver, of course, we will deliver as soon as possible, but also in the terms of how much we are delivering, it will be, of course, less than the US. But in terms of certain systems, like for example the Patriot system, air defense, we are already doing more than the US, and I hope we keep that up. And Andrew, sorry, it's funny. Andrew's playing with us. Yeah, it's popping in my screen all the time. Yeah, so I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, for our listeners, Andrew is able to like move his avatar around a bit, and he's very mischievous about it. It can be distracting. When I was reading the news, he almost broke me. He almost broke me once, but I managed to power through. So thank you for your question, Kellen. Thank you for your response. My question is sort of just maybe a more general question. It's sort of, I mean, it does sound like, based on your news this week, like there's a different kind of tone coming out of Germany, and I would maybe suggest maybe even Europe. There does seem to be some acknowledgement that like we can't necessarily count on U.S. help all the time, especially not like for Ukraine, let alone like European security, right? So we need to start like taking this more seriously. So I guess my question to you would be like, is there a change in the air? Like, do the Europeans seem to have more of an attitude that there needs to be more of a security, self-reliance? And in terms of in the air, is there a change? And then on the ground, is there a change? Like, we have seen Germany give really long-term commitments to supporting Ukraine already, right? Like 10-year budgetary commitments and things like this. But, like how, if there is a change in the air, like, do you see that reflected so far on the ground? Go ahead.
It's a hard question. In terms of European security, I think that most of the people, most countries, if not all, have already acknowledged the situation that Europe needs to do more for their own defense and not rely as much on the US like we did before. I think a good example, for example, is Germany permanently stationing a full brigade with 3,500 to 4,000 people with all the equipment necessary in Lithuania, starting next year, when I remember right. Something Germany hasn't done since the existing, when I remember right, of the Bundeswehr. I think that's just one example of Europe stepping forward and not relying so much on the US. And in terms of Ukraine aid, I think at least for Germany that counts. I'm not that involved with other countries, so I won't speak for them. Because I might miss something. Maybe Erland can talk about Norway, for example. But in terms of Germany, like you said, we have multi-year commitments up already, like 10 years in the future. And for contracted systems, for example, we have tanks contracted in the industry up to 2024, 2025. We have air defense systems contracted up to 2025, ammunition up to 2024, 2025. You get where this is going. Like everything which Germany is right now donating to Ukraine, we have already contracts for the supply to Ukraine of military aid up to the year 2024, like the end of 2024 or even 2025 already. And we're doing contracts with the industry every month. So I wouldn't worry about that, at least not in terms of Germany.
Yeah, thanks. I think that concludes our particular segment on German aid. So I wanted to move to actually another German, though, our good friend Bionade, who's actually on his last day for a trip he's made to Ukraine. You came to bring some aid to Ukraine from Germany. So I think this is a good segue. Bionade, my friend, I know you're here not only to talk about your time there, but also maybe talk about a little news. But first, I want to ask, like, how's your trip? How's everything looking in Ukraine? Like, you just want to share with us a little bit about what's going on. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Joseph. Like always, the Ukrainians, the hospitality is unmatched, in my opinion. People are very nice here. The culture here is amazing. People are playing music in the streets. Everyone is trying its best to support the troops, and after having this mostly military heavy segments, let's talk about society. And what a surprise, the Ukrainian society is supporting the military. There was a protest this week in front of the Kyiv city council. People protested about the budget, and they wanted to have more budget, not allocated to rebuilding streets in Ukraine or Kyiv actually, but give the money to the armed forces of Ukraine. And after demonstrating not only this week's but like for the last weeks, the government finally gave by and said like, okay, we will allocate more money to the armed forces of Ukraine. It's important right now, and without a strong society, it's hard to have a strong army. But in Ukraine, you really have a strong society. You can feel it in the streets
I'd just
everywhere.
I'd add quickly, Bionade, that I almost included that in the news report because, as you said, it was a fairly large protest, like a few hundred people involved, and we actually had a segment of like several months ago on Tochnyi. Our friend Vasil came on and talked about a similar protest in Dnipro city. And I think it, first off, it obviously demonstrates like Ukrainians still very democratically minded people are taking civil action to make sure, as you said, like the armed forces are taken care of. But it's just like an important, I don't know, these happen in Ukraine from time to time, and it's just worth mentioning here.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, for this reason, I spoke to a friend today who actually was part of this protest, and we will invite someone who can have an interview with us and talk a bit about these kind of topics and why the people think they should focus more on the military. So I don't know if it will be next week or in 2 weeks, but we will have someone here actually from Ukraine who was part of these protests, and we will talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. There's like a very deep connection, right, between Ukrainian civic life and supporting the armed forces. Like I think, and that organic connection is a really important part of making Ukraine stronger and enabling them to resist Russian aggression and like move them on the trajectory towards, becoming part of the EU, which is like another big event this week, right? Like, in other words, Ukrainians on the streets in civil society are on the streets, and in civil society are fighting corruption, right? They're making sure that their local funds are spent responsibly, and that's ensuring that the army has what they need to continue staying in the fight. And that also ensures that like Ukraine is combating corruption to the expectations of the EU, which will allow them to accede into the EU quicker, right? And that's something that was mentioned by the European representatives, was something like, they're very impressed with how quickly Ukraine is, meeting the standards that are required for EU accession, and that they expect them to basically meet all of the requirements pretty quickly. And I think, a lot of that can be explained by this very active and robust civil society in Ukraine, where people, it's not always, it can be very confusing and messy, especially for outsiders, but it really is very active and engaged, right?
Yeah, but I have to lower your expectations a little bit there. Ukraine has implemented theoretically many of these laws, but they're still working on the actual enforcement of much of these laws to meet the EU standards. This is a point where they're working on. Because like writing these laws is the one thing, but implementing these laws actually in real life is another thing. But talking about this, I personally witnessed something like this, right? In front of my hotel where I also stayed last time, there was a street full of like small shops, small businesses, and these were businesses basically without a permit. This kind of permit system wasn't enforced until a couple of weeks ago, but now it's like getting enforced. All the businesses without a permit had to go, and now it's a different kind of view. Maybe the flair is not as much as I liked it before, but I think with the permit system they have now and enforcing this, there's a greater value for the Ukrainian society, collecting taxes, and taking actually care of the businesses and not having like popping up, more or less illegal businesses. So,
Yeah.
also, what I wanted to mention, you mentioned the civil society and the importance of their support. A friend of the show, Yaroslav, I visited. His father said something very, very valuable in my opinion. He said like, very important for the Ukrainians is the support of the civil society from the West. The support from the US government, the support of the German government, of every European nation is very valuable. But seeing people going to Ukraine, donating to Ukraine, normal people from the West helping normal people in Ukraine, this is really what they value, what they understand, and what they see, and see as a great accomplishment, and they really value this. So every small donation, every private person who is engaged helping Ukraine, the Ukrainians recognize this and are happy about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did want to ask you maybe about the Kyivstar stuff, because I know you were talking to me a little bit about that previously, but is there any other stuff you wanted to cover yourself before I ask you about that?
Oh no, let's talk about the Kyivstar stuff, because like this was like a huge impact in my opinion on the Ukrainian society. You have any specific questions, or should I give you an overview?
I guess so. I gave a very brief overview in the news report, but just maybe a lot of people missed it. So let's just, if you want to just give like a very brief intro, and then I think like because you were on the ground, I'm very curious about the impact of it, right? So if you could speak to that. Go ahead.
Let's start with the technical side, because like you mentioned the technical side, you mentioned the the claims of the Russian hacker group that they actually destroyed hard drives, equipment, computers, and other things. I don't know how they managed to get access in this kind of way and form for to these systems, because usually the permissions and the access accounts are more evenly distributed. You usually make sure that no account has like access to all these systems at once. So whatever happened there, this was absolutely not best practice. From the technical side, the effects also, even if they claim there were like no user data, for example, like credit cards or names and addresses were not compromised. When they really had access to the systems they claimed had access, they possibly know what cell is your home cell, right? Where are you logging in from? What is your movement profile between the cells? Where are you going? Where are you spending your day because you have your phone with you, right? These are all like data which can like really be used, and that's it's really questionable how this could happen. In my opinion, as a professional in this area, this was really like bad standards and possibly not best practice implemented from the technical side. Especially seeing that they took so long, and still not every system is working. It's very, very, very bad to see. Coming maybe to the point of the impact on the Ukrainian society. I think the first impact we saw was actually long. So the Ukrainians, I think on the 13th started, right? 12th or 13th, I'm not really sure which day. But the problem there really was 24 million subscribers in Ukraine are subscribers of Kyivstar, which is really a lot. The majority of society has like at least one SIM card from Kyivstar, and also in general they have 29.5 at 29.5 million subscribers. This means even around 5.5 million people outside of Ukraine right now. We're still with Kyivstar. They have a really nice, so I think I pay around €5 for my Kyivstar subscription per month, and I have 5 gigabytes of internet, which is for Germany a very good price. And this is roaming, right? Ukraine is a Ukrainian provider, Kyivstar is a Ukrainian provider, and I have in Germany 5 gigabytes, internet subscription, roaming. For this price, you possibly will not find any other provider who gives this to you. So many people, were hit by these. Especially a big problem, or what we saw were like the long lines, because Kyivstar claimed they will like repair this in 4 to 5 hours and will be up running at the same day, which did not happen. Still until now, not everyone like has connection. Maybe you have connection and maybe you have internet, but still there are backend systems like the Kyivstar app where you lot more money on your app, where you can see how many data volume you used and everything from your data plan. It's not accessible. Verification SMS are not sent consistently. Multi-factor authentication via SMS is a problem. And we have to consider Ukraine is in relation to Germany, for example, a highly digitalized society, right? You have your bank account on your phone, you get your multi-factor authentication via phone. You have your whole identity in the DIA app. The air raids alert are distributed by phone also. So some people did not know if their air raid alert happened or not. If they live in rural areas, this is really a problem for subscribers from Ukraine with Kyivstar. It had a huge impact. The systems are still not up running, and long queues basically formed in front of shops of Vodafone and Lifecell, which are the other two big providers in Ukraine. It even happened that most of the stores run out of physical SIM cards, and it's a huge problem. I think Lifecell took the initiative and started a giant advertising campaign in the Kyiv metro. There were like whole metro stations full of Lifecell advertisings, so people would just change to other providers. They were advertising this, and the impact was enormous. Kyivstar announced they want to compensate the users for this, but how do you compensate people who maybe missed the last call from a friend from the front line, right? How do you compensate people they couldn't reach family for a couple of days? How do you compensate people who did not have access to their bank accounts because like they couldn't access this because their authentication went through SMS or other services provided by Kyivstar? This is really a huge issue, and I still look forward how this will work out and what Kyivstar is trying to do to make to compensate people for these kind of situations, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, like, do you have any thoughts? I think it's pretty evident that, first off, the hacking war, or the cyber war, however you want to say it, is nothing new. This day one of this war, probably even before day one, the first attack was probably launched over the internet. There were significant cyber operations going on. It seems there have been some fairly spectacular ones. Usually they involve like trying to like put stuff on broadcasting, like there's been a lot of that, but this seems like a pretty significant escalation on both sides, right? In terms of the quote unquote cyber war. There's been on the Russian side, like their whole tax system got screwed up by Ukraine, and we have to imagine they pulled all that data as well. Whereas on the the Ukrainian side, this whole all the cell phone stuff got pulled and melted. So I don't know. Do you just have any thoughts about like what this means? I guess in terms of I know you work in IT, so just like do you think there are countermeasures that need to be taken? Do both sides need to start taking this more seriously? Do you think this escalation signals something moving forward?
So I think this hack is on a phone provider and like starting an outage in like this kind of form, which has such an impact, is historically unmatched. I personally haven't heard about anything like this. If anyone like has any examples, please write me about this. But like for a mobile provider like this kind of outage is really unmatched in my humble opinion here. Like I said, Kyivstar did absolutely not use any best practice here that this could happen, because you don't have accounts which have access to so many different systems at once that this kind of breach could happen. So yeah, questionable how this worked out. I mean, we have seen big hacks. We have seen big systems taking place, big botnets being built. Like Stuxnet, right? But like having this actual impact on civil society, that's a new form of warfare. And I'm possibly there will be studies in a couple of years about this. But this is really a thing which never happened before, in my opinion.
Just as an addition, like you're talking about best practices, but don't you think it's possible that, for example, one specific point was targeted, let's say spear phishing attack, and they got access to that, and once the first wall fall, it's probably easier to get through the other ones, right? Because you have a trusted account. I mean, all the technical, I personally assume that the technical blockades and the security is very, very high for a phone provider and stuff like this. But in most of the companies or most of the hacks, like the weakest point is always a human, right? I mean, you get access to one point, you can probably move around much quicker.
Absolutely. But usually, as a phone provider, you at least have like a kind of a backbone network and a basic service network, which you have physically switched off, physically installed in your next to your systems. And if really the worst case scenario happened, you switch off the compromised network and start up the uncompromised network, which was like literally physically switched off and which could not be like switched on except someone physically went there and switched on a switch. So these systems have electricity. This is usually the best practice for like telecommunication and backbone networks. It doesn't mean that everyone has internet in the moment they switch on, but like the whole network of Kyivstar was gone for at least 2 days. No contact via SMS, no calls, nothing. The SIM card couldn't log in, nothing. Hence, this is really like a thing which usually does not happen. So you're right. If you get the first access and you have like a privilege escalation and you get more and more data, it can like happen that these things happen. But in this kind of manner, we possibly have to wait what happened and why it happened. But it's crazy. It's not comprehensible for me that a hack like this could happen and could be so successful.
Yeah, I think like it's understandable what you're saying. Like from a technical standpoint, you should be able to contain something like this. It shouldn't be like network wide, right? That seems like a technical failure. But I think what Germany to Ukraine is saying is also true, which I can't confirm this, and I think it was just speculation or rumor. But like there was a story going around that it was like a compromised worker that somehow like. Do you know anything about that, or was that just a rumor?
Yeah. But like, just from the standpoint, a compromised worker should not have, like, there are so many big systems, big networks, and big technical hurdles which should be separated from each other and not be able to access from one account. So these were like really, it's either the greatest hack the Russians ever made, or it was really just badly concepted network which went down.
Yeah, one will hope that there will be some personnel shifts at Kyivstar, and I hope much less. And I have a little bit of confidence that there will be less shifts in the Russian tax office, which I'm happy about. But anyway, we have some questions from the audience, Bionade, so I thought I would ask. Real quick, we'll just say goodbye to John Ridge. John, thank you for your contributions today. Appreciate it. Yep. Everyone in chat, give a thumbs up for John Ridge, I guess.
Pleasure being here, y'all.
Thank you, John. So real quick, we have some questions from the audience, Bionade, but maybe a little bit about your trip. So what's transport in Ukraine what's transport like in Ukraine right now? I would maybe add to that, like if you could speak a little bit to your border crossing situation, if there's anything you want to say about that, go ahead.
So I went through the border with, I took this BlaBlaCar app, right, where you can drive together with other people in their personal cars or whatever device they are using to cross the border. Inside of Ukraine, I'm a big fan of Ukhrzalytsia. It's better working than the German railway, the Deutsche Bahn, I have to say. It's working really reliable. Inside of Kyiv, for example, sorry, mispronounced. It's not Kyiv, but Kyiv. I was taught this. It's more an Ö sound than an E sound. So inside of Kyiv, I try to use a metro, which is really reliable. I think there are 1 or 2 metro stations which were closed off this week because there was some water damage, but they are working on it. But inside of the city, you can pretty reliable use public transport, and with a hryvnia per trip, it's about 20 euro cents. You have a really good and fast and cheap possibility to go around the city. To the border crossing, I think some of you saw the video about the trucks which were still standing on the Polish border. I think most of this has been resolved now. It depends on which time you go to the border. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's quicker. If you're with a bus, you have a special line for buses. If you're in a private car or a car sharing system like I used, you have a longer line usually. But it's working pretty well, in my opinion. Tomorrow I will take the train back to Chelm, to Poland. I will see how long this will take, but
Right, and just for the audience, you came in a vehicle because you guys are bringing a vehicle to some volunteers, right?
No.
Oh, no.
It was just a vehicle of some couriers who were bringing basically goods to Ukraine. And,
Okay. I just want to make sure you cross in on a vehicle the first time, but you're leaving in a train. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, exactly. With some couriers who brought packages from Germany and Poland to Ukraine. Quite interesting. We took some stops inside of Poland where Ukrainians work on near the autobahn, near the highway, basically, on truck stops. They collect goods from friends and other people who want to send goods to their family to Ukraine, and it's quite an interesting distribution system.
Thank you. And the second question was, in the midst of trying to survive Russian aggression and missile attacks and drone attacks, what does the festive season in Ukraine look like or mean, Bionade?
So there are no Christmas markets like there were before in Ukraine, right? People still try to move their businesses underground. Here and there, you have like small, small shops or people staying outdoor selling a Ukrainian form of glühwein, basically, right? Some hot wine, drinks, cherry juice with alcohol. Also, it's they have different things, and they try to make this happen. Often in Ukrainian subway stations, you have musicians playing music to get up the mood of the people. Very talented people, in my opinion, playing really nice music, and it's everyone tries to be as festive as possible.
It seems to me also that like Ukraine goes pretty hard when it comes to like decorations, like civic decorations, right? Like the cities seem to take pride in having relatively large like displays at the city center. Would you agree with that?
So in general, Ukraine has like much displays and advertising in at least in Kyiv. They have it there, right, and show. But it's nothing like that everywhere are like LED lights or something. In the restaurants and bars, there's Christmas decoration, but also everyone considers the situation with the electricity. So they are try to use, for
Right.
example, batteries or accumulator based decoration, and not based on the energy grid in this kind of way. But they do their best to keep the mood up, to make it festive and enjoy the Christmas time as good as they can.
Yeah, it's a good point. Sorry, you reminded me that like a lot of the videos I see of Christmas in Ukraine is before the full-scale invasion, and they're much more like, I don't know, pleasant displays or large like electric displays of lights and things, right?
Yeah. Also, like it's. I mean, Ukrainian advertising. If you ever will be here, Ukrainian advertising is a kind of advertising for itself. It's really good. I really like it. There is, for example, a bank which is making advertising to like open an account and you will get like 3 power stations for for a reduced price. Basically, this is what they are doing. Everyone tries to be equipped with power stations or with generators, but they started switching to the power stations right now because not everyone in a private household can place a generator in a good space. So they use these power stations like they used them last year when they have like these 4 hours of electricity per day. They charge up their power station, and then when the electricity is gone, they would use it. But until now, there were like no planned shutdowns of electricity. The electricity is working well, and it's working quite good. To the missile attacks, I've been here in Ukraine for like 2 weeks now. Basically, I had almost every day air raid alerts when I was in Lviv, when I was in Khmelnytsky Oblast, also because of the airfield, which is in Khmelnytsky Oblast. It's many attacks. Here in Kiev, I had basically also air raid alerts almost every day. I heard the Patriot working multiple times, but it's working quite well. Actually, we had, I think, on Monday morning 10 ballistic missiles going directly to Kiev, and no, it was 8, and 2 days 2 days later it was 10, and the systems, the air defense systems, managed to like shoot down everything. Sadly, we saw the impact of one of the attacks where like up to 50 people were wounded. Luckily, no one died, but it's quite shocking to see how much effort Russia takes in there to try to hit every possible part of Ukraine, and especially the civil society. Friend who I met here showed me a picture and said like a building he lived in a couple of years ago in Kiev was just hit the night before, and he moved out of this building 1 or 2 years ago, but it's still quite shocking when you see the building you once lived in getting hit by debris from a rocket. Also, there was this Shahed attack lately on Kiev, and it's the thing was not that the Shaheds were really like successful, but it took really hours, and I sat together with people saying like the biggest problem is they are at work. They're not going home tonight because the way would be just too far, and there's a curfew from 12 o'clock to 5 in the morning. So basically, they have to stay at work and can't go home to their loved ones. And my friend was really worried about his daughter at home alone, right? So and when this attack is not just like a 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, but like going on for 4 hours, and there's still a lot going on. So it's quite nerve-wracking for the people living here.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 points there. Is like one, as you said, there it's not just the people that get hit directly, which obviously they're the largest victims, but people have to. It's a huge disruption in people's daily lives. If you're at the grocery store, you got to drop all your groceries. You got to go leave the store. If you're at work, you have to go into a shelter, or as you said, like you can't leave home. The other thing I wanted to mention was, even if you're diligent about going to the shelter, this week there was a missile attack where it was like instant, right? Like the alarm went off and the hit happened. So I don't know. Could you talk about that for a second?
Oh yeah, like these 2 ballistic missile attacks. Basically, the first one, I was woken up by the Patriot working 1 or 2 minutes before the actual alert was started. The other one was basically the alert started, and immediately I heard the Patriot working. Try to put on my pants. Basically, and while I was putting on my pants and assembling my stuff, I heard the first explosions, and it's I had this experience last time where they intercepted the rocket directly next to my hotel, so I went a bit into survival mode and threw myself on the ground, which wasn't necessary at this point, but you never know. If you hear explosions, you don't know if this is 300 meters away, a kilometer away, or if it's 5 kilometers away, right? Kyiv is a giant city. It's a big city. Sometimes you see messages from people asking you, "Are you okay? I'm hearing explosions," and you don't hear it because like it's really in a other part of the city, and you just don't hear it. But when you hear explosions, it's usually in a radius between up to 5 kilometers, and then it's better to be careful, right? Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a difficult situation, and it's hopefully Ukrainians are diligent about heeding the air alarms. But it's also worth noting that they're not always they can't always warn people in time, and people are victims of these attacks. And even when you're not, your life is being constantly disrupted. You're being woken up. You're being disturbed in your daily life. So Bionade, I wanted to wrap up today's show actually with our segment, of course, the picture of the week. Usually Jonathan does this, so it's fallen on me today. I don't think I can present it maybe with as much fanfare as Jonathan does. But if you want to maybe speak a little bit about your picture, please, if you could describe for anyone who can't see it, and then maybe tell us about like why it's significant to you.
It's a picture we are seeing right now on the stream, right?
Yep.
Yes. So this is the opera house in Lviv. It's, how you can see from a architectural way, quite amazing. The lighting is just breathtaking. I was at this place last week, basically beginning of the week. There was a big Christmas tree, basically from where I took this picture, right? A couple of meters behind me, there's a giant Christmas tree. This is shortly before the curfew starts, so people were not around anymore. But usually there are people around this place listening to artists on the street playing music. People were dancing on the street to this music. Children were going around because it was around the Saint Nicholas Day, where they get presents and collect presents, but they don't want a presents for themselves. They collect it for the armed forces of Ukraine to support different units. And there we're back at this point. Without a strong society, you don't have a strong military, and the Ukrainian society is standing absolutely behind the Ukrainian armed forces. It's quite breathtaking and amazing. For me, this picture is also, I think we all see the historic influence on this building, right? It really looks from the architectural way. There are many like Roman influences on this building. It's not somewhere how people would like think, oh, this is somewhere in Eastern Europe, and like there's a big steel and cement block. No, this is absolutely part of Europe, showing the culture and the identity of Europe, and it's quite amazing to see this this kind of style in Ukraine. And it's not that it's only this building, many buildings which are not from the Soviet times, but all look like this. And we can clearly see the European influence all over Ukraine, especially in its architecture.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bionade, for taking the time to call in from your trip to Ukraine. We appreciate it, to describe some goings on the ground. So, everyone, thank you for tuning in this week to Tochnyi Weekly. We at Tochnyi is accurate in Ukrainian, so we're a group of people that try to bring accurate news about the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. We try to answer all the questions in chat when you guys ask, and we do our best to present you guys with accurate information to get behind the headlines and inform people about what's really going on with Russia's illegal full-scale invasion. So thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. If you could please, like the stream, subscribe to Tochnyi. We appreciate your support. It really helps us get our message spread further to help people understand what's going on, and beyond just very oversimplifications or misconceptions. And we also appreciate everyone for tuning in. Thanks everyone, of course, who contributed. Thanks to Colby. This is bad. If I start naming everyone, I'm going to forget someone, and then it's bad. But I'm going to try to name everyone. Thanks to Colby. Thanks to John Ridge for talking about cluster munitions. Thanks to German Aid to Ukraine for his report. Thanks, of course, to Andrew for coming in, sharing his thoughts with us. Andrew, of course, has a great stream. It's Andrew's at 8 p.m. New York time.
Yes, on Tuesday, and 3 p.m. on Friday, which is 7 Central European time.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so Andrew's got a great stream. Andrew has a map that keeps a very accurate account of the current military situation in Ukraine. Highly recommend it. So thanks to Andrew for stopping in and sharing his thoughts, which are always very valuable to us. And thanks, of course, to Erlen for helping with running the stream, and also to contributing some of his thoughts as well. I already thanked Bionade, and there's me. I think I got everybody. Did I miss anyone? Okay, good. Perfect. So the last thing I'll say is we do stream every week at 2100 Kyiv time. However, we think next week, because it's Christmas Eve, we'll probably do something on Saturday. We're not 100% sure on that yet, but yeah, we're going to reschedule. We'll do something, but it won't be the regular stream. So we won't be having a stream next week. We'll have content for you. So please subscribe. And we'll see everyone in some form next week. So yeah, with that, I think we'll close out. Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava.
Heroyam Slava.
On behalf of the brave.